A baby coos softly, realizing he has been reincarnated yet again. Now named Lex, he introduces himself as a young boy born into an ordinary farming family. He explains that his remarkably coherent and arrogant inner voice is simply a byproduct of his rebirth. In his previous life, he reigned as an unstoppable hero who wielded the strongest sword to annihilate demons and enemies. However, he clarifies that this is actually his second time experiencing the reincarnation cycle. Before his time as a hero, he lived as an all-powerful sage who mastered every form of magic. Despite earning endless praise as both a sage and a hero, he constantly found himself dragged into exhausting battles and disaster prevention duties. Leaving those grand, troublesome titles in the past, he vows that this time around he will just live a peaceful, utterly normal life. Declaring himself a symbol of freedom, he completely rejects any future responsibilities in favor of enjoying true peace of mind. To achieve this quiet life, he sets his sights on becoming a simple adventurer. 15 years later, a grown Lex stands before his parents and announces his departure. In this world, reaching the age of 15 marks adulthood and the time for children to leave home to find work. Having repeatedly proclaimed his goal, his parents offer no resistance to his chosen path as an adventurer. His parents give him their blessing to live his own life, warmly reminding him that he is always welcome back if things get too tough. With a confident grin, Lex confirms his departure and steps out into the world. His parents cheer him on, urging him to do his best and stay safe on his journey. Expressing his heartfelt gratitude, he bids his family a final farewell. Walking away from his childhood home, he celebrates the absolute freedom that now lies ahead. He strides forward with intense purpose, ready to embrace his new destiny. Brimming with excitement, he hypes himself up to finally begin his adventurer career. However, his enthusiastic momentum stalls slightly as he considers his immediate situation. He calculates that walking to Tugai, the nearest town, will still take him at least half a day. Frustrated by his late start due to the morning's maturity ceremony, he realizes he needs to hurry if he wants to register today. Deciding not to waste another second, he prepares to drastically pick up the pace. Channeling his past life skills, he heavily buffs both of his legs with raw magical power. Launching himself into the air, he rockets across the sky with unrestrained speed. Scanning the landscape below, he quickly spots the town of Tugai in the distance. He briefly considers using short-range teleportation magic to close the remaining gap effortlessly. Suddenly inspired by the core duty of an adventurer, he pivots and decides to go hunt some monsters first. Spotting a distinct hue below, he identifies his first potential target as a green dragon. He figures a normal dragon is the perfect, low-profile prey for someone trying to live a quiet life. Confident in his easy victory, he readies his proud sword, a weapon heavily enchanted using his ancient knowledge. Gripping his blade tight, he dives in to swiftly hunt the massive beast down. Casting a haste spell, he accelerates his dive to blistering, unavoidable speeds. He screams a battle cry, determined to storm the creature and obliterate it in a single strike. Mid-strike, his attack falters as something entirely unexpected catches his eye. He notices the green dragon is completely distracted, staring intensely at something else nearby. Shrugging off the creature's odd behavior, he decides to finish his lethal attack regardless. With a fierce swing, he strikes out with overwhelming magical force to secure his first kill. Landing cleanly after his successful hunt, he immediately looks around for his next challenge. Lex proudly shows off a magical handbag he crafted himself while continuing his harvest. He explains that despite its ordinary exterior, the bag's interior space is infinitely expanded by magic to perfectly fit items of any size. Tossing another massive item into his inventory, he marvels at the bag's incredible utility. Pleased with his haul, he enthusiastically declares his harvesting task complete. Glancing at the sky, he realizes he needs to hurry out of the area before darkness falls. Brimming with excitement, he prepares to rush off and finally register as a proper adventurer. Pausing mid-stride, he thinks he hears a faint noise echoing nearby. Dismissing the sound as nothing important, he decides to simply ignore it and move on. Meanwhile, a desperate group of travelers reflects on a terrifying crisis that recently struck them. Ambushed during their journey by a fearsome green dragon, they know even the kingdom's finest army would stand no chance. A seasoned warrior notes that calling the beast a mere strong enemy drastically undersells its grim, overwhelming power. Barking orders, a leader commands his men to use their horses as bait to distract the dragon while they flee for their lives. Acknowledging the painful sacrifice of losing their mounts, he insists it is the only way for the group to retreat safely. Refusing to leave his comrade Volhan behind, another warrior named Leo draws his weapon and vows to risk his life by his side. Suddenly, a mysterious figure drops from the sky with a fierce battle cry, shocking the embattled men. The warriors stare in sheer disbelief as they realize their sudden savior is just a young boy. Landing gracefully after striking the decisive blow, the teenager casually celebrates his successful hunt. Stunned into silence, the men realize the terrifying battle ended before they could even process what happened. Right before their astonished eyes, the boy pulls out a small bag and effortlessly absorbs the dragon's massive corpse. Witnessing this unbelievable sight, the veteran warrior immediately suspects the bag is a high-tier magic item. He quickly dismisses the thought, refusing to believe a mere teenager could possess such an extraordinary artifact. Snapping out of his daze, he yells for the boy to wait as the mysterious savior prepares to leave. Still trembling, the men realize the terrifying monster was utterly defeated and vacuumed away in the blink of an eye. They stand in awe, trying to comprehend how the fearsome dragon was cleanly sliced in two within a single second. Suddenly remembering his duty, Leo panics and urgently checks on the safety of the princess they were escorting. A nearby guard quickly reassures Sir Leo that the princess is completely unharmed, though she has fainted from the shock. Breathing a massive sigh of relief, Leo praises the guard for his excellent work in protecting her. Exhausted by the extreme tension, the old warrior admits his heavy heart and weary body were pushed to their absolute limits. Turning back to Volhen, he shares a moment of profound gratitude that they somehow survived the impossible ordeal. As their remaining horses whinny in the background, the warriors are left wondering who that insanely powerful teenager truly was. Arriving at Tugai town, Lex breathes a sigh of relief as he realizes he can still register as an adventurer today. He takes in the sweeping view of the bustling, vibrant settlement stretched out before him. Wandering through the lively streets, he eagerly scans the area for the Adventurers Guild. A massive, imposing building suddenly catches his eye. Curiosity taking over, he carefully peeks inside the lively establishment. Confirming the location, he steps forward with absolute certainty that he has found the right place. Inside, he finds himself completely awestruck by the chaotic chatter of seasoned warriors and mercenaries. Glancing around the crowded hall, his excitement skyrockets at the sheer number of real adventurers surrounding him. Shaking off his amazement, he remembers his main goal and scrambles to find the reception desk. Spotting the registration area, his momentum comes to a screeching halt when he sees the incredibly long line. A sudden voice startles him, casually asking if it is his first time queuing up so late in the day. An older man named Garand pegs him as a complete novice, and a nervous Lex confirms it is indeed his first day. Surprised by his lack of luggage, Garand listens as Lex explains he bolted from his village the moment his maturity ceremony ended. Garand notes that the late afternoon crowd usually consists of veterans reporting missions, making a new registrant quite a rare sight. Curious about the boy's origins, the veteran asks where he traveled from, prompting Lex to name Zenj village. Admitting he has never heard of it, Garand asks for directions and points out that getting here requires crossing the Western Mountains. Covering his tracks, Lex quickly claims he used a secret mountain shortcut, leaving the older man quietly baffled by his reckless enthusiasm. Noticing the line finally moving forward, Garand bids the young boy farewell and steps ahead. A cheerful voice rings out from the front desk, calling the next person forward. Stepping up to the counter, Lex is warmly greeted by Elmer, the guild receptionist, who asks if he wishes to register. Clenching his fists with burning determination, he loudly and proudly confirms his goal. Elmer giggles and admits she already overheard his passionate speech to Garand, leaving Lex completely red in the face. Shifting to official business, she asks if he can read and write, to which Lex quickly insists he can handle the paperwork himself. Handing over the forms, she instructs him to fill out his details, unaware that Lex's past life as a sage makes this incredibly trivial. His pen flying across the paper with furious speed, Lex proudly slams the completed form back onto the desk. Reviewing the document, Elmer is genuinely stunned by the sheer elegance of his handwriting. She casually mentions that the guild is actively recruiting administrative staff with such refined penmanship. Horrified at the thought of a desk job, Lex vehemently begs her to just make him an adventurer, prompting her to laugh and suggest he save the desk job for retirement. Moving the process forward, Elmer informs him that his next requirement is a mandatory reality skill test. Confused by the term, Lex asks for clarification, and she explains it is a mock combat trial to prove his basic competence. Suddenly, an imposing, fully armored man turns around, projecting the overwhelming aura of a seasoned brawler. The massive warrior interrupts the conversation, casually asking Elmer if he can personally oversee the rookie's exam. A shocked Elmer immediately protests, reminding Org that an A-rank adventurer has no business testing a total beginner. Org brushes off her concern, arguing that any newbie registering this late must be a promising talent worthy of his direct instruction. Leaning across the counter, the veteran whispers a secret justification to Elma in order to force her hand. Defeated by his mysterious reasoning, Elma sighs heavily and accepts that she has no other choice. Apologizing to Lex amid the murmuring crowd, she officially assigns Org as his combat examiner instead of the usual guild staff. She reassures the boy that despite Org's eccentric behavior, receiving advice from an A-rank veteran is a rare privilege. Lex bows deeply and humbly asks the veteran to take care of him, just as a loud announcement blares that the material purchasing counter is closing. Remembering the massive dragon corpse still sitting in his inventory, Lex completely panics as he realizes he needs to sell it immediately. Noticing the boy's urgency, Org asks if he has something to sell before they begin. Lex explains he is completely broke and needs to sell monster materials just to afford room and food. Slapping his back with a booming laugh, Org tells him to hand his items to the purchasing lady so they can appraise it during the combat test. Overjoyed by the towering veteran's understanding nature, Lex sincerely thanks him for the opportunity. Turning toward the reception desk, the young boy politely excuses himself to handle his business. Approaching the counter, he asks the attendant to appraise his mysterious catch. The attendant blinks in utter confusion as she waits to see the item. Warning that his haul is a bit bulky, Lex casually decides to place it on the guild floor. He pulls a massive green dragon from his bag and cheerfully asks the guild to purchase it. The entire hall trembles in stunned silence as Lex turns around and brightly announces he is ready for his test. Freezing completely in his tracks, Org frantically orders the boy to hold on. The veteran demands to know if Lex actually hunted the terrifying beast, which the boy eagerly confirms he did on his way to town. Bombarded with desperate questions about his methods, Lex innocently explains he struck its blind spot and removed its head with a single sword blow. The surrounding adventurers stare in horror, confirming it is indeed a true, fully grown green dragon rather than a lesser wyvern. Lowering his voice, an awkward Lex asks Org if they can just hurry up with the combat evaluation. Snapping out of his paralyzed daze, Org violently points at the boy and screams that he passes. Shocked that they have not even crossed swords yet, Lex questions the sudden decision. Org wildly explains that a basic mock battle is completely unnecessary for someone who can solo a dragon, instantly welcoming him into their ranks. Whirling around to face Elma, Lex asks if the examiner's abrupt ruling actually counts. Smiling warmly at the chaotic scene, Elma officially confirms the result and congratulates Lex on passing. Tilting his head back, Lex unleashes a massive cheer of pure victory. He celebrates finally becoming a true adventurer and excitedly looks forward to his new life of freedom. Stepping back into her professional role, Elma hands him his official Adventurer's Guild registration card. She instructs him to present the card at the reception desk to accept missions and again to report their completion. She explains that all rookies start at rank F and must actively climb the ladder by accumulating successful achievements. Pumping his fist, Lex vows to do his absolute best to rise through the ranks and unlock a wider variety of jobs. Elma quietly mutters that someone of his monstrous skill won't need to work hard at all, prompting a confused Lex to ask if she said something. Brushing off his question, she nervously redirects his attention back to the slain dragon. She regretfully informs him that purchasing such a massive beast is actually a highly difficult task for their local branch. Dropping the bad news, she bluntly states that the guild simply cannot buy it from him. Lex instantly panics, asking if the market is overly saturated with green dragons and rendering his catch worthless. Org aggressively steps in, questioning Elma's bizarre reasoning and demanding to know why they cannot process the monster. Hesitating under the veteran's intense gaze, Elma prepares to reveal the true issue. She shockingly announces that the green dragon's corpse is just far too beautiful. The crowd murmurs in collective realization, finally grasping the true depth of the guild's logistical nightmare. Crossing his arms in annoyance, Org tells Elma to stop being overdramatic and just explain the situation clearly. Regaining her composure, Elma addresses the room and explains that standard dragon expeditions are notoriously brutal affairs. She notes that fighting powerful dragons forces hunters to risk their lives, practically guaranteeing massive damage to the beast's carcass during the struggle. Lex listens with intense curiosity as she outlines the harsh realities of high-level monster hunting. Elma concludes that finding fully intact monster parts is incredibly rare, making his perfectly preserved dragon far too valuable for their branch to afford. Staring in awe at the impossibly neat cross-section of the neck, the guild members marvel at the monster's perfectly intact and shiny body. Elma explains to the shocked crowd that an intact dragon corpse of this caliber is a priceless treasure. Highlighting that dragons possess no useless body parts, she emphasizes that this flawless beast is a truly exceptional find. Lowering her head, she regretfully admits that their local guild branch simply lacks the budget to purchase such magnificent material. Staring intensely at the young boy, Elma begs Lex to entrust the monster to the guild so they can auction it at the capital for a fortune. Tearing up in sudden alarm, Lex frantically apologizes and explains that waiting for an auction will put him in severe trouble. Raising her voice over his panic, Elma loudly insists that an auction guarantees an unimaginably handsome payout. Gasping in absolute despair, Lex confesses that his completely broke status leaves him without food or a bed for the night. Driven to frustrated tears by his short-sightedness, Elma aggressively pleads with him to accept the massive, life-changing fortune. Surprising the entire hall, Org slams his own coin pouch onto the table and volunteers to cover the boy's dinner and rent. Stunned by the towering veteran's unexpected generosity, a deeply grateful Lex instantly accepts the financial lifeline. Wanting to repay the kind gesture immediately, the young adventurer humbly extends a small, freshly harvested gift toward the veteran. Apologizing for the supposedly humble offering, Lex casually hands over an absurdly valuable piece of the dragon's gill. Org freezes in utter silence, his eyes locked onto the priceless material as his brain fails to process the boy's casual gesture. Breaking out of his stunned stupor with wild enthusiasm, the veteran eagerly snatches up the precious item before Lex can reconsider. Roaring with boisterous laughter, Org dismisses any remaining concerns and proudly declares that he is buying dinner tonight. Overhearing the bold declaration, the surrounding adventurers erupt into cheers and excitedly plot to eat the newly rich veteran into bankruptcy. Cursing at his rowdy friends, Org immediately regrets his loud mouth and violently tries to fend off the freeloading guildmates. Later that night, a thoroughly satisfied Lex pats his completely stuffed stomach after an incredible feast at the nearby pub. Smiling warmly at the chaotic energy of his new friends, the young boy realizes this wild atmosphere is exactly what being a true adventurer is all about. Clenching his fist with burning anticipation, Lex excitedly prepares for his grand, official life as an adventurer to truly begin tomorrow. The scene opens on a quiet morning, signaling the dawn of a brand new adventure. Stepping into the bustling guild, Lex excitedly declares that his life as a true adventurer has finally begun. Spotting his destination in the distance, he eagerly rushes forward to check out the mission board. Approaching the crowded board, he realizes the throng of towering adventurers completely blocks his view of the quests. Suddenly, a familiar veteran calls out from the crowd, asking the young boy if he is searching for his very first mission. Lex confirms his plan to take a repeatable F-rank task while silently wondering if the man witnessed his epic dragon sale the day before. The older adventurer pauses thoughtfully, muttering that there are indeed cautious rookies who prefer to start from the absolute bottom. Offering a friendly wave, the veteran tells him to do his best as Lex enthusiastically vows to work hard. Scanning the F-rank section, Lex deduces that the veteran was likely implying most newbies recklessly take requests far beyond their actual limits. His eyes quickly land on a simple, repeatable F-rank mission that requires gathering basic medicinal herbs. Smiling with deep satisfaction, he happily selects the humble herb-gathering task as his very first official job. He notes that this repeatable format guarantees him 3 silver coins every single time he turns in a bundle of 10 herbs. Most importantly, he remembers that repeatable missions carry absolutely no penalty for failure or delays. Standard missions strictly enforce deadlines and heavily penalize adventurers who fail to deliver on their promises to clients. Recalling Org's booming laughter, he remembers the veteran advising him that a penalty-free gathering task is the absolute safest choice for a complete beginner. Lex feels his heart melt with gratitude, deeply appreciating Org for both lending him money and offering such wise guidance the previous night. Confident in his choice, he reminds himself that he already has plenty of experience gathering potion herbs back in his rural hometown. Suddenly, a young, energetic boy interrupts his train of thought to ask if he is really planning to take that specific quest. Lex confirms his intention to gather herbs while silently noting that the stranger looks to be exactly his own age. Bursting into boisterous laughter, the boy loudly mocks the mission by pointing out that even little children can gather weeds. Leaning in closer, the spirited youth assumes Lex became an adventurer to prove his adulthood, just like his own crew. Quickly analyzing the boy's agile stance as a light swordsman, Lex shifts his gaze to identify the stealthy girl behind him as a rogue. Glancing at the remaining party members, he easily deduces their combat roles as a devoted priest and a magically equipped warlock. Excited to meet fellow rookies, Lex brightly asks if they are also freshly registered adventurers embarking on their first journey. Striking a dramatic pose, the confident boy proudly introduces himself as Hyro, the fearless leader of Team Dragon Slayers. One of Hyro's teammates immediately groans and scolds him for using such a ridiculous, grandiose team name. The rest of the party violently agrees, whining in unison about how incredibly embarrassing the title is for a group of absolute beginners. When Lex innocently admits he actually thinks the name sounds cool, an overjoyed Hyro instantly promotes him to honorary junior member. Pumping his fist, Hyro passionately advises the new recruit to kick off his adventurer career with a massive, explosive achievement. Sporting a smug expression, the young leader warns that settling for small jobs like picking herbs will permanently trap him in the lowest ranks. Leaning in with theatrical intensity, Hyro begins to share his ultimate master plan for rapid ascension. Pointing directly at the sky, Hyro loudly declares his absolute vow to surpass the legendary, rumored Dragon Slayer. Confused by the title, Lex listens blankly as the group gossips about a mysterious warrior who shocked the guild yesterday by casually selling a perfectly preserved dragon corpse. Completely oblivious to his own fame, Lex genuinely wonders if some other insanely strong adventurer sold a dragon at the exact same time. Assuming the rumored slayer is a far superior hunter, Lex humbly marvels at how quickly this unknown hero became famous without taking a single wound. Hyro passionately hypes up the story, explaining that the magnificent corpse was so pristine the guild was forced to auction it to capital nobles. Urging Lex to drop the boring herb quest, Hyro reveals that his team is heading out right now to take on a thrilling monster extermination job. Without waiting for an answer, Hyro bolts toward the exit while a panicked teammate frantically yells for him to wait. Pausing briefly, one of the girls awkwardly apologizes for Hyro's chaotic energy, assuring Lex that their leader is just an overly enthusiastic idiot. Watching the chaotic party chase after their reckless leader, Lex smiles warmly at the beautiful bond of having true teammates. Lex declares he will do his best to gather herbs, resolving to complete his mission despite being completely different from the other adventurers. Scanning the area, he decides this spot looks like a good place to start. Even though gathering herbs was an ordinary chore back in his hometown, doing it as an official adventurer job makes him feel incredibly special. He quickly spots a patch, realizing he needs to look in the shade where the plants thrive. Carefully plucking only the leaves, he leaves the roots intact so the herbs can grow back again. He moves efficiently through the brush, ripping up handfuls of leaves as he spots more nearby. Continuing his harvest, he eagerly pulls up plant after plant as his collection rapidly grows. Gazing at the dense foliage, he marvels at the massive quantity of herbs available in the area. He happily calculates that this massive haul will not only clear his quest but also allow him to repay the 5 silver coins he borrowed from Og. Humming a cheerful tune, he happily goes about his harvesting work. Since his hometown lacked stores, he realizes this is his very first time gathering herbs specifically to sell for profit. He smiles brightly, thoroughly enjoying the freedom of working entirely by his own choice. Overflowing with excitement, he expresses deep gratitude for finally becoming a real adventurer. Checking his massive bundle, he decides he has gathered plenty and prepares to head home. He notes that he needs to hurry back, warning himself that the reception desk will become overwhelmingly crowded if he arrives too late. Suddenly, he freezes in his tracks as a heavy silence falls over the forest. He realizes with growing concern that all the natural sounds of the woods have completely vanished. Knowing this eerie silence is never normal, he deduces that a super powerful monster or a terrifying disaster must be approaching. Hearing the distant crack and smash of destruction, he dramatically sharpens his senses to locate the source of the disturbance. Pinpointing the chaos, he detects the heavy rumble of the ground and the violent sound of falling trees. Locking onto the coordinates, he confidently identifies the general location of the threat. Launching himself into the air, he decides to get a bird's-eye view to properly assess the situation. Looking down at the chaos, he is shocked to see a massive stampede of evil boars. He recalls that these demonic boars are frequent, highly destructive pests with incredibly fast rush attacks and tough fur that repels low-quality weapons. Gripped by tension, he remembers the single most frightening trait of these vicious beasts. Staring at the massive, roaring swarm below, he notes the sheer terror of their aggressive herd behavior. Observing their wildly agitated state, he realizes there is absolutely no sign the herd will stop on its own. Panic sets in as he calculates that the nearby city is in immense danger if the stampede continues. Tracking their rapid pace along the current route, he estimates they will smash into Tugai City in less than an hour. Feeling the weight of his new title, he vows that as an adventurer, he must destroy the herd. He firmly believes it is his absolute duty as a guild member to fight any monsters threatening innocent civilians. Remembering the guild's code, he knows adventurers build their nationwide credibility by abandoning all profits to defend cities from monster swarms. He fondly recalls how stories of self-sacrificing heroes protecting cities are passed down for generations to inspire young children. Burning with righteous determination, he declares that he must become that hero for the children today. Preparing his magic, he realizes he does not need to preserve their corpses like the dragons, but he spots something odd while worrying about collateral damage to the forest. Squinting at the stampede, he notices the boars seem fiercely focused on chasing a specific target. Tracking their slightly erratic movements, he deduces they are not actually heading straight for the city by choice. Floating higher, he eagerly scans the front of the herd to see exactly what they are hunting. His eyes widen in shock as he finally identifies the desperate figures running for their lives. He realizes with a gasp that the massive herd is relentlessly hunting down a party of fellow adventurers. Guessing the rookies accidentally triggered the herd, he cancels his large-scale magic to avoid catching the humans in the blast. Determined to protect them, he completely abandons his area of effect spells to prevent any friendly fire. Thinking rapidly, he prepares to switch his combat strategy to a more precise method of attack. Zooming in on the fleeing party, he is stunned to recognize Hyro pushing his team desperately forward. Suddenly, one of Hyro's teammates trips and screams as the horrific boars close in. The monstrous beasts roar wildly, practically breathing down the terrified adventurer's neck. Paralyzed by fear, the fallen teammate cries out as the massive boars prepare to trample him into the dirt. Refusing to leave his friend behind, Hyro curses loudly and aggressively turns back to face the unstoppable stampede. Just as the lead boar lunges, a sudden, explosive impact violently tears through the chaotic battlefield. Descending like a meteor, Lex unleashes a devastating, ground-shattering strike directly into the beast's skull. The surrounding boars flinch in absolute shock as the massive shockwave halts their relentless momentum. The lead boar is instantly crushed into the ground by the overwhelming force of Lex's precision attack. A heavy, stunned silence instantly falls over the once chaotic forest as the dust begins to settle. One of the surviving boars squeals in utter confusion, terrified by the sudden annihilation of its leader. Landing gracefully amidst the wreckage, Lex firmly plants his boots onto the destroyed earth, shielding the fallen adventurers. Pointing his weapon at the remaining herd, Lex boldly declares that he will be their opponent right here and now. Screaming in absolute terror, the young adventurers desperately flee for their lives. Sprinting through the dense forest, Hyro frantically wonders how their mission devolved into such a catastrophic nightmare. A panicked teammate fiercely blames Hyro, shouting that they only ended up in this deadly situation because he arrogantly pushed them to go further. Snapping back defensively, Hyro yells at his crew to shut up while cursing their incredibly rotten luck for encountering such beasts. Glancing back at the terrifying stampede, the young leader remains in sheer disbelief that these massive creatures were actually lurking in the woods. He recalls how smoothly things started when they were easily dispatching weak monsters like goblins and kobolds using tactics learned from veteran adventurers. Buoyed by their early success and the safety net of healing magic, he foolishly believed they could easily conquer this area without breaking a sweat. But all of his arrogant confidence instantly shatters in the face of brutal reality. Staring at the rampaging horde, his mind races with panic as he struggles to understand why such massive, terrifying monsters are wandering this close to civilization. He remembers the adults in town assuring them that knights and guards routinely clear out any large threats near the city borders. Despite those reassuring rumors, the colossal and horrifying beasts are violently tearing through the forest right behind them. Suddenly, the team's priest trips and cries out in pain, prompting a horrified Hyro to realize she is badly wounded and needs immediate help. The monstrous boars immediately close the distance, their massive hooves threatening to crush the helpless girl into the dirt. Frozen by absolute terror, Hyro realizes with a sinking heart that he is completely powerless to save her from being trampled. Torn between loyalty and survival, he frantically debates whether to abandon her and run or risk getting completely crushed alongside her. Before he can even make an agonizing choice, time runs out as a massive beast lunges directly at the fallen girl. Screaming at the top of his lungs, Hyro desperately throws himself forward with a wild battle cry to shield his fallen comrade. A deafening impact shakes the very earth as a massive shockwave kicks up a blinding cloud of dust. Bracing for a fatal blow that never comes, Hyro slowly opens his eyes in utter confusion to see what just happened. Standing firmly between the terrified party and the deadly stampede, Lex boldly declares that he will be the monster's opponent from now on. Staring in absolute disbelief, Hyro realizes their miraculous savior is just a teenager of the exact same age. Yet despite his youthful appearance, This mysterious boy exudes an overwhelmingly powerful and confident aura. Lex locks eyes with the rampaging herd, entirely unfazed by the terrifying beasts growling before him. Breathing a quiet sigh of relief, Lex mentally celebrates arriving just in the nick of time to prevent a tragedy. Shifting his focus to the battle ahead, he vows to completely obliterate the stampede and secure the safety of Hyro's entire team. Scanning the immediate area, Lex notices the injured priest grimacing in pain and realizes she cannot walk. He quickly calculates that moving to heal her directly might provoke the agitated boars into a sudden, aggressive charge. Refusing to leave her suffering, he decides to utilize a highly specialized magic technique to solve the problem. Extending his hand toward the fallen girl, he silently casts a powerful ranged healing spell to mend her wounds from afar. The priest gasps in pure shock as her pain instantly vanishes, while Lex smiles in satisfaction that his magic worked perfectly. Knowing he must anchor himself in place to maintain the monster's attention, he is glad the ranged spell allowed him to hold the front line. Snapping out of her daze, the priest listens as Lex urgently commands her to fall back so he can gather the herd and fight them all at once. Angered by the sudden interference, the massive boars scrape their hooves against the dirt and prepare for a devastating group charge. Lex calmly anticipates their primitive strategy, knowing the mindless beasts will simply try to crush him with their overwhelming combined weight. Narrowing his eyes with supreme confidence, he vows to stop their brutal assault dead in its tracks. Channeling a massive surge of nature magic into the earth, Lex casts a high-tier binding spell known as Hold Tree. The surrounding trees instantly warp and twist into thick, aggressive vines designed to ensnare and completely immobilize enemy targets. Reinforced by raw magical energy, this incredibly stiff and elastic timber net guarantees that the massive boars cannot possibly escape. The charging beasts slam directly into the magical vines, screeching in furious panic as they are hopelessly trapped within the dense thicket. Watching safely from the rear, the rookie party stares in absolute awe, completely baffled that Lex just cast a legendary, unknown spell without even uttering a single chant. Lex watches the stunned rookies, calmly noting that chanting spells is usually considered a fundamental rule of combat. Relying on the vast memories of his two past lives, he completely understands their sheer shock and lack of real combat experience. Embracing his role as an experienced adventurer, he confidently resolves to solve this massive problem with absolute efficiency. Pointing his hands toward the sky, he boldly declares that this violent battle is already over. He grounds himself firmly, drawing an immense surge of magical power from his core to prepare a devastating technique. The air around him aggressively crackles as raw, overwhelming energy bends the very atmosphere to his will. Channeling violent electricity straight from the roaring clouds, he forges the terrifying power into a massive blade of pure lightning. He fully manifests the great magic sword, an awe-inspiring weapon completely overcharged with atmospheric voltage. Unleashing a fierce battle cry, he commands the roaring weapon to strike down the trapped evil boars. He detonates a blinding lightning slam that completely engulfs the thrashing herd in a blinding flash of pure energy. Remembering his past master's ultimate teachings, he uses the shapeless blade to neutralize the beasts purely by boiling their blood from within. Exhaling a heavy breath, he lowers his stance as the electrifying shockwave slowly fades into silence. He briefly cringes at a past memory, recalling how his old master harshly scolded him for acting smug about this exact technique. Snapping back to the present, he celebrates preserving their highly valuable pelts and casually asks the terrified party if they are all right. The team's warlock nervously stammers that they are completely uninjured but completely drained of all their magical power. Knowing the forest trek back to the city is highly dangerous without mana, Lex steps forward to help despite their nervous protests. Apologizing for the sudden intrusion, he firmly places his hand over the warlock and instantly transfers a massive surge of his own mana. As she gasps at the overwhelming energy, he casually explains that this borrowed mana will easily allow her to cast defensive spells on their way home. The warlock trembles from the overflowing power while Lex turns away to happily harvest his fresh prey. Suddenly, an intensely serious Hyro steps forward and calls out, prompting Lex to pause his gathering work. Bowing with absolute reverence, the entire rookie party expresses their profound gratitude for saving their lives from total disaster. Blushing slightly at the praise, Lex humbly waves off their thanks by claiming that rescuing fellow adventurers is just basic common sense. Still completely awestruck, Hyro respectfully asks the mysterious powerhouse to finally reveal his name. Realizing he never formally introduced himself to the team, Lex smiles warmly and turns back around. He proudly introduces himself as Lex, genuinely hoping they can all work together smoothly in the future. Hyro mutters the boy's name under his breath with burning, wide-eyed intensity. Noticing the boy's bizarre and highly intense stare, Lex cautiously asks what is suddenly on his mind. Completely shattering the quiet atmosphere, Hiro passionately screams out and addresses him as his ultimate big brother. Tears streaming down his face, Hiro confesses his absolute foolishness, admitting his arrogant goblin hunts nearly got his best friends killed. Worshipping Lex's incredible rescue, Hiro loudly declares he finally understands what true strength and maturity look like. The young leader aggressively screams that he is completely captivated by Lex's overwhelming, awe-inspiring power. Dropping directly to his knees in the dirt, Hiro fiercely begs Lex to take him in as his official combat apprentice. Lex reels backward in absolute, terrified shock at the ridiculously intense request. Despite internally protesting that he absolutely never wanted a disciple, Lex ironically narrates that this was exactly how he gained his very first apprentice. Elmer warmly congratulates Lex, announcing that he has successfully completed his mission and officially been promoted to D rank. Caught completely off guard, the young adventurer stares blankly at the receptionist in sheer shock. Stunned by the sudden jump, he questions how completing a simple herb-gathering task resulted in skipping straight from F rank to D rank. Lex mentally calculates the sheer absurdity of ranking up twice from his very first F rank assignment. Waving his hands in disbelief, he frantically asks Elmer how such a massive promotion is even possible. Suddenly, a beaming Hiro interrupts the conversation to enthusiastically praise his big brother for already reaching D rank. A female teammate quickly grabs Hiro by the collar and aggressively drags the loudmouth away from the counter. As Hiro whines like a needy pet, his teammate firmly reminds him that they still need to report their goblin and kobold extermination missions. Watching them leave, Lex admits he is slightly troubled by the apprentice request but genuinely appreciates Hiro's honest and open approach. He recalls that during his first 2 lives, the people who approached him usually harbored dark, hidden intentions. Remembering those past burdens, he reflects on how exploiters constantly tried to steal his research or manipulate his hero status for their own selfish causes. Snapping out of his dark memories, Lex quickly smiles and tells a concerned Elmer that nothing is wrong. Elmer smiles back and hands him a heavy pouch containing 15 gold coins as a handsome reward for collecting 50 bundles of herbs. Ignoring the massive payout, a desperate Lex begs the receptionist to fully explain the logic behind his insane rank promotion. He leans over the counter, convinced the guild made a massive clerical error in ranking a rookie up this incredibly fast. Elmer firmly reassures the panicked boy that it is not a mistake and that he is undoubtedly recognized as a true D-rank adventurer. Smiling patiently, she offers to break down the exact reasoning behind his sudden, unprecedented advancement. Starting with the herb mission, she expresses the guild's deep gratitude for acquiring such a massive quantity of exceptionally high-quality medicinal plants. She explains that since adventurers constantly suffer injuries during their dangerous missions, the guild can never have enough medical supplies. Furthermore, she notes that the strict evaluation team highly praised his incredibly meticulous gathering technique. Lex blushes slightly, quietly thrilled that someone actually noticed and appreciated his careful harvesting methods. Transitioning to the main reason, Elmer brings up the recent combat report regarding the exterminated evil boars. A confused Lex tilts his head, genuinely wondering how simply beating a few boars resulted in a D-rank promotion. Elmer explains that evil boars normally require B rank or higher to defeat, making it a severe disservice to keep him stuck in F rank after he effortlessly slaughtered an entire herd. She reveals that the guild originally intended to immediately promote him to B rank or C rank based on that incredible feat alone. However, because it was only his first official mission, they deliberately settled on D rank to keep him completely out of unwanted trouble. Breathing a heavy sigh of relief, Lex finally understands the guild's protective, calculated logic. He feels a warm sense of gratitude, genuinely touched that the guild staff cared enough to prevent him from drawing dangerous attention too quickly. Lowering her voice to a whisper, Elmer admits that his legendary green dragon hunt also factored heavily into their careful promotion strategy. She explains they are temporarily withholding his dragon-slaying evaluation to prevent things from getting insanely messy if the general public finds out. Relieved to dodge the spotlight, Lex cheerfully agrees with the decision while casually brushing off the beast as only a green dragon. Elmer sighs internally, utterly baffled by his casual dismissal of such a legendary, terrifying monster. Changing the subject, an eager Lex proudly mentions his beautifully hunted evil boars and asks about selling them. He smugly details how he flawlessly froze their wounds with a spell to prevent any germs from ruining the valuable meat. Elmer instantly freezes in place, breaking into a nervous sweat as she processes his ridiculous level of perfection. Apologizing profusely, she regretfully informs him that the boars' bodies are simply too perfectly preserved for the guild's current budget to afford. A devastated Lex panics, realizing his flawless hunting skills have once again robbed him of his immediate payday. Softening the blow, Elmer explains that the guild will buy one boar for research, a feudal lord will purchase another, and the rest will be auctioned at the capital. Nodding in understanding, Lex gives her official permission to send the remaining flawless carcasses to the royal auction block. He silently thanks his lucky stars, relieved that the massive immediate payout from the 2 sold boars will easily cover his living expenses for the time being. A confused Lex tries to calculate just how much money his beautiful evil boars will actually fetch. Elmer calmly informs him that the guild is willing to purchase 1 evil boar for exactly 1,000 gold coins. Utterly stunned, Lex stares at her blankly as his brain fails to process the massive sum. Elmer quickly explains that since they cannot produce that much raw cash immediately, they will pay 100 gold coins upfront and put the remaining 900 into a passbook. Lex trembles in absolute shock, his jaw practically dropping to the floor. He mentally screams in disbelief, struggling to accept that a single boar is worth 1,000 gold coins. Lex furiously crunches the numbers in his head, realizing the massive payout is roughly 33,333 times larger than his herb-gathering reward. Leaning heavily over the counter, he desperately asks Elmer if the guild has made a catastrophic pricing error. Elmer gently shakes her head, explaining that using large-scale magic to defeat monsters without ruining their valuable parts is incredibly difficult. She points out that the absurdly high price is based entirely on the flawless preservation of the beast's skin and fur. Lex awkwardly accepts the logic, understanding that an absolutely intact pelt commands a premium in the market. However, Elmer adds that the guild has not officially set the final price because the local feudal lord's messenger also approached them to buy it. She reveals that Viscount Grimoire, an incredibly wealthy aristocrat with massive lands, might easily outbid the guild's initial offer. Lex is completely flabbergasted, wondering if the wealthy lord is actually prepared to pay more than 1,000 gold coins for a simple boar. He silently notes that the demon world is filled with far superior monsters, completely baffled by the extreme overvaluation of a basic evil boar. Changing the subject, Elmer moves on to discuss the remaining boars scheduled for the upcoming capital auction. She warns him that he will have to wait patiently for the auction proceeds to clear before he sees that money. Brushing off the delay, Lex happily asks how his green dragon is faring at the exact same auction, noting that his immediate 100 gold coins are more than enough for now. Elmer reveals the dragon was shipped to the capital last quarter for an auction starting in 3 days, noting that nobles are probably already fighting over it. She reassures Lex that the massive dragon will absolutely fetch a significantly higher bid than his evil boars. A highly amused Lex chuckles to himself, genuinely excited to see exactly how much profit his dragon will yield. Suddenly snapping her fingers, Elmer apologizes for almost forgetting to deliver a highly important message. She formally announces that Viscount Grimoire, the feudal lord himself, has officially invited Lex to dinner, to which Lex immediately and bluntly declines. Without skipping a beat, Elmer calmly accepts his refusal while the surrounding adventurers freeze in sheer horror. Hyro screams in absolute shock, violently shaking Lex as he demands to know why he rejected a tremendous honor from a literal lord just because it sounded troublesome. Hyro frantically argues that such a meeting could easily end with Lex being promoted to an official knight. Lex flatly rejects the idea, apologizing but firmly stating he has zero interest in any knightly titles or grand promotions. He firmly declares that his only goal is to live a completely simple, peaceful life without any noble drama. Politely bowing to Elmer, he quickly excuses himself from the chaotic conversation. Leaving the stunned Hyro behind, Lex cheerfully plans to pay back his debt to Org and enjoy a massive feast with his new wealth. Meanwhile, a group of distinguished nobles gathers in an opulent room to discuss the latest capital gossip. One of the nobles leans in and asks his peers if they have heard the massive, ongoing rumor. His associate nods in agreement, confirming they are well aware of the legendary dragon slated for the upcoming auction. They excitedly gossip about the impossible, flawless condition of the beast's corpse, specifically marveling at how its head was cleanly severed in a single strike. The noble reveals that an actual eyewitness was present during the beast's terrifying defeat. An impatient knight demands to know the identity of the mysterious witness. The noble casually drops the name of Sir Leo, explaining that the knight was on a top-secret mission when the dragon attacked. Sir Argyle scowls in irritation, annoyed that he was completely excluded from knowing about Leo's secret assignment. Ignoring the drama, another noble interrupts Argyle, eagerly pushing the conversation back to the actual dragon fight. Reminding them that it is impolite to pry into classified missions, he demands the juicy details about the mysterious Slayer. Argyle grunts in frustration, reluctantly dropping the topic of the secret mission. The gossiping noble relays Sir Leo's bizarre report, describing how a young boy suddenly fell from the sky, decapitated the dragon, and instantly flew away. The gathered lords stare in absolute disbelief, questioning if Sir Leo has completely lost his mind. Laughing at the sheer absurdity, the noble mentions that military higher-ups are officially classifying the impossible event as being solved by an angel. A quiet, calculating aristocrat listens to the chaotic rumors while quietly sipping his tea. He mentally lists the major mysteries surrounding the incident, from the secret mission to the unknown weapon and the angelic boy. Knowing the dragon auction will be fiercely contested, he correctly identifies that his main priority must remain focused on winning the upcoming bidding war. He internally debates whether he should form an alliance with another noble to pool their funds before a frantic messenger suddenly bursts into the room. Gasping for air, the messenger loudly announces that a new batch of evil boars has just been added to the auction block. The nobles react with sheer confusion, completely baffled by the sudden inclusion of such basic monsters. They quickly dismiss the news, noting that simple boars are completely worthless compared to the legendary dragon they are already fighting over. The messenger aggressively interrupts, shouting that the boars are in such miraculously perfect condition that their pelts can be used as entire luxury rugs. The calculating aristocrat is immediately stunned, realizing a flawless boar pelt rug would be a masterpiece in any castle hall. The messenger drops another bombshell, revealing that 3 identically perfect evil boars are going up for auction at the exact same time. The room erupts in absolute chaos as the nobles scream in sheer disbelief at the impossible quantity of flawless materials. The messenger struggles to regain control of the room, shouting that he still has one final, unbelievable piece of news. He dramatically reveals that the person selling the 3 perfect evil boars is the exact same mysterious adventurer who listed the legendary green dragon. The nobles freeze in sheer terror, utterly overwhelmed by the impossible implication of a single person providing all these legendary materials. The calculating aristocrat stares blankly ahead, completely bewildered by the insane, world-shaking events originating from a simple border town. A smiling Elmer warmly greets Lex, clarifying with disbelief if he actually intends to take this specific, lowly mission. Standing his ground, Lex eagerly confirms his choice, prompting a heavily sweating Elmer to ask if he is absolutely sure. She points out that typically, only brand new, desperate F-rank rookies accept tedious quests like goblin extermination or herb gathering. Leaning over the counter, she whispers in sheer horror that nobody willingly takes on the foul task of ditch cleaning. Gesturing to his newly acquired status, Elmer gently reminds him that a D-rank adventurer should not resort to a mission universally considered a punishment. She strongly advises him that as a rapidly rising star, there are far better, more prestigious quests suited for his incredible talents. Lex passionately rejects her logic, declaring he just wants the absolute freedom to try every single type of mission, regardless of the pay. Completely defeated by his bizarre enthusiasm, Elmer sighs heavily and officially registers his request for the ditch cleaning job. Chuckling weakly, she admits that his massive newfound wealth means he does not actually need to worry about profitable quests anymore. Lex throws his fist into the air, boldly declaring he is ready to dive straight into today's grand adventure. Suddenly, Hyro pops up behind him, excitedly calling out to his big brother and asking if he is heading out on a mission too. Lex enthusiastically greets Hyro by his Dragon Slayer's team name, prompting the boy to cringe and beg him to never use that embarrassing title again. Confused, Lex playfully reminds Hyro that he proudly claimed just days ago that he would become a great adventurer and conquer the world. Ignoring Hyro's desperate screams to stop, Lex loudly recites Hyro's embarrassing old vow about needing to slay dragons to justify the team name. Hyro shrieks in absolute humiliation while his female teammate smugly remarks that they are finally getting along perfectly. Desperately trying to change the subject, Hyro points at the quest board and quickly asks Lex what mission he accepted today. Proudly puffing out his chest, Lex brightly announces that his grand mission for the day is ditch cleaning. Hyro stares in absolute, horrified disbelief, desperately asking for confirmation while his entire team echoes the sheer shock. Screaming into the sky, Hyro demands to know why a legendary powerhouse would willingly subject himself to such a filthy, low-paying chore. Stepping forward to interrupt the chaos, the team's apprentice priestess introduces herself as Norb and warmly thanks Lex for saving them the other day. Lex humbly waves off her gratitude, insisting it was just common sense to help, and quickly asks how her leg is healing. Norb excitedly praises his incredibly high-level magic, assuming he must be a deeply religious person to wield such divine power. Lex mentally cringes, remembering how a high priest in his first life violently accused him of blasphemy when he bluntly stated that devotion does not actually affect magic. Moving on, the parties which introduces herself as Mina, while the energetic thief introduces herself as Megui. Lex nods respectfully to the team, happy to finally formally meet all the members he rescued. Snapping the conversation back to reality, Hiro furiously demands to know the real reason Lex is choosing to clean dirty ditches. Smiling mysteriously, Lex asks the rookie party if they are familiar with the legendary tale of the great swordsman Rigid. The teammates immediately nod, recalling how their parents used to read them that exact heroic story when they were children. They excitedly chatter about how Rigid was universally known as a master swordsman and an unparalleled adventurer. Lex raises a finger, reminding them that before achieving greatness, Rigid originally started out as a complete, arrogant troublemaker. He recounts the famous turning point where a furious guild leader forced Rigid to clean ditches for an entire year or face losing his adventurer's license. Lex dramatically describes how a reluctant Rigid endured relentless mockery, nearly exploding in anger multiple times while doing the filthy work. He highlights the story's climax, explaining that when the townsfolk eventually thanked Rigid for his hard work, the troublemaker finally felt deep shame and turned over a new leaf. Hiro's eyes light up with sudden understanding, excitedly assuming Lex is cleaning ditches purely to train his mind and follow in the legend's footsteps. Laughing off the profound assumption, Lex casually admits he just wanted to experience the famous chore, then quickly asks what mission the team is taking. Megui chimes in, explaining that they are surprisingly taking a night shift job, prompting a concerned Lex to ask if that is too dangerous for rookies. She dismisses his concern, explaining they are investigating a recent rumor about a creepy, mysterious voice echoing through the night streets. She proudly reveals that the townsfolk officially requested the guild to solve the mystery of the creepy voice, making it a perfect patrol job. Lex nods in understanding, agreeing that a simple night patrol usually pays quite well for the effort. Suddenly, an eager Hiro leans in and asks if he can tag along to closely observe Lex's ditch cleaning method, leaving Lex utterly confused. Hiro eagerly explains that watching Lex clean might give him a hint to become stronger, though Lex sweat drops and reminds him it is just a normal ditch cleaning job. The rest of the team realizes they are tagging along too, with Megui flatly commenting it will not be interesting while Hiro excitedly thanks his idol. Norb notes she would feel bad leaving Hiro alone and is genuinely curious to see Lex work, as long as they finish in time for their own night shift. Resigning to their fate, Megui sighs and rallies the team to follow their overly enthusiastic leader. Arriving at the designated spot, Lex stops and calmly points out where they will begin the cleanup. Hiro pumps his fist in pure excitement to finally witness the legendary work, while Lex repeatedly insists there is nothing special about his method. Staring at the murky water and thick sludge, Lex observes that standard cleaning magic clearly could not reach this neglected area. A passing townsman warmly encourages the boy, praising his noble effort to clean the filthy ditch. Blushing with deep pride, Lex promises to do his best while internally celebrating that he finally feels like the legendary Rigid. Rolling up his imaginary sleeves, he steps forward with burning determination to tackle the mess. Hiro suddenly interrupts in sheer confusion, frantically asking Lex how he plans to clean the ditch without bringing any physical tools. Casually dismissing the need for equipment, Lex simply raises his hands to demonstrate his unique method. Channeling an immense surge of magical energy, he boldly casts a full clean purification over the entire area. The entire party screams in absolute terror as a blinding, explosive light unexpectedly engulfs the street. Shielding their eyes from the blast, the rookies stare in sheer disbelief as the flash completely vaporizes the filth. Hiro demands to know what just happened as Lex innocently explains he used a wide-area purification spell to instantly erase the sludge. Shocked that such magic even exists, the rookies listen as Lex casually describes it as a standard spell for sanitizing massive cities. Norb stammers in pure awe, confirming that the blinding light was actually an extremely rare holy attribute spell. Lex mentally shrugs, remembering how church officials in his past life aggressively scolded him for using sacred holy power for simple household chores. Trembling with reverence, Norb praises his unbelievable abilities while a deeply embarrassed Lex insists it is not that amazing. Pointing down the street, Lex cheerfully announces he will use this exact method to instantly clear every single ditch in town. Sweating nervously, Hiro points out that this overpowered method completely ruins the humble lesson of Rigid's story, but Lex happily argues the final result is the same. Ignoring the party's sheer bewilderment, Lex briskly leads the group to the next dirty location. Wasting no time, he unleashes another massive burst of holy energy over the second canal. The blinding holy light erupts once again, flawlessly purging every ounce of dirt from the waterway. As the light fades, Megumi suddenly points in alarm at a strange anomaly left behind in the water. Following her gaze, the group spots a suspicious mass writhing inside the freshly cleaned canal. The dark, formless blob sizzles aggressively under the fading holy light. Lex calmly identifies the creature as a dark blob, explaining to a confused Hiro that it is a formless, dark attribute monster. He warns that these swamp-dwelling beasts are notoriously hard to spot in the sludge and often launch devastating surprise attacks on soldiers. Panicking, Hiro prepares to attack, but quickly stops when he notices the monster is rapidly shrinking. Lex casually explains that his powerful purification magic doubles as a lethal weapon, actively burning the weak dark monster away. As the creature dissolves into nothingness, Lex notes the real problem is that such a dangerous beast managed to slip into the town undetected. He deduces the creature infiltrated the waterways by hiding in the thick sludge during the day to hunt safely under the cover of darkness. A sudden realization hits the rookies, and Hiro gasps as they realize this monster was the true source of the creepy nighttime voices. Hiro excitedly praises his big brother for flawlessly completing the ditch cleaning while accidentally solving their patrol mission at the exact same time. The excitement instantly dies as Megumi bluntly points out that since Lex killed the target, their team technically failed their own quest. A heavy, awkward realization washes over the group as they stare blankly at the empty canal. Breaking the deafening silence, a wildly sweating Lex awkwardly apologizes for accidentally stealing their hard-earned target. Desperate for guidance, Hiro aggressively begs Lex to pick out a new weapon for him. Lex tilts his head in utter confusion, wondering why the young rookie is asking him for equipment advice. Hiro excitedly explains that Lex's sword must be an incredible artifact since it slaughtered the evil boars in a single strike. Shattering the boy's illusions, Lex casually pulls out his basic broadsword and reveals he simply amplified its sharpness with magic. He quickly warns that an ordinary blade, even when enhanced, will shatter if used against enemies with inherently stronger defenses. Lex nonchalantly credits his lightning magic for finishing the boars, prompting a sweating Hiro to point out that lightning spells are notoriously difficult to master. Brushing off the difficulty, Lex argues the magic is actually incredibly simple once you understand the basic theory. Listening to this casual dismissal, an exhausted Hiro internally grumbles that only a natural genius would say something so ridiculous. Noticing Mina's eager gaze, Lex kindly offers to teach her the secrets of lightning magic. He promises to share whatever knowledge he has, leaving Mina absolutely thrilled by the rare opportunity. A beaming Mina cheers in triumph while Lex smiles, genuinely surprised she wanted to learn the element so badly. Jealous of the attention, Hiro violently clings to Lex and whines for his big brother to teach him swordplay too. Trying to remain humble, Lex awkwardly insists there are far stronger warriors out there to learn from. Hiro fiercely rejects the humility, aggressively reminding Lex that effortlessly driving a sword through an evil boar's solid skull is completely abnormal. Overwhelmed by the boy's relentless whining, Lex finally caves and agrees to teach him, sending Hiro into a victorious frenzy. Escaping the celebration, Lex redirects their focus by asking if they are still heading to the weapon shop. Hiro stops cheering and awkwardly admits he completely forgot their original objective. Regaining his composure, the young leader proudly escorts Lex to the finest army in the entire town. Stepping into the bustling shop, Lex marvels at the massive, impressive inventory of steel lining the walls. Across the room, an arrogant adventurer casually plucks a decorative sword from the premium display rack. Admiring the gorgeous hilt and shiny finish, the man smugly decides it perfectly suits his style. Flashing a confident smirk, he casually tosses it onto the counter and declares he will purchase it. The shopkeeper flatly demands 10 gold coins, completely shattering the boastful buyer's confidence. Humiliated by the astronomical price tag, the broke adventurer stammers a frantic apology and sheepishly retreats. Laughing heartily at the man's retreat, the shopkeeper notes that 10 gold is an absolute steal for a masterpiece forged by Master Gordov. Watching from afar, Hiro whispers in sheer awe that he has never seen anyone try to buy a legendary Gordov blade before. A completely lost Lex leans in and quietly asks if this Gordov person is actually a big deal, leaving Hiro utterly baffled. Lex awkwardly blames his countryside upbringing for his ignorance, while Hiro stares at him in sheer disbelief. Hiro passionately explains that Master Gordov is a legendary craftsman whose unparalleled skills are revered across multiple neighboring nations. Staring critically at the supposedly mastercrafted weapon, Lex silently notes its poor construction and wonders if it is actually a cheap fake. Hiro begins to sweat nervously as Lex casually voices his blunt, highly critical opinion out loud. Suddenly, a massive, intimidating man steps out from the forge and aggressively demands to know if the boy has a problem with the sword. Completely unfazed by the giant's anger, Lex calmly states that the blade simply feels too poorly made to be considered great. Narrowing his fierce eyes, the towering blacksmith steps closer and challenges the boy to explain exactly why his work is lacking. Lex flawlessly dismantles the weapon's design, noting that while the exterior decorations are gorgeous, the blade itself completely lacks fighting spirit. He expertly exposes the half-baked tempering process, deducing that the metal was barely hammered and would instantly dull in real combat. Concluding his brutal review, Lex compliments the sturdy grip but dismisses the actual blade as a glorified, blunt iron club. The massive man grunts heavily, crossing his thick arms as he digests being told his masterpiece is a mere lump of iron. Glaring down with terrifying intensity, the giant loudly asks if Lex is truly calling a sword forged by the great god of dull. Lex instantly panics and screams in horror, realizing he just brutally insulted a legendary blacksmith directly to his face. Looming over Lex, Gordov questions how his personally forged sword could look dull. Suddenly erupting into loud laughter, the massive blacksmith praises the boy's incredibly sharp eyes. He explains he grew tired of ignorant customers buying his work solely for his famous name. Eyes widening, Lex quickly deduces the true nature of the overpriced weapon. Gordov proudly confirms the flashy blade is just a sturdy, intentionally dull decoy. Panicking, Lex argues that selling blunt weapons could get clueless adventurers seriously killed. Gordov dismisses this, noting those rookies only take easy quests and will return for real steel later. Scanning the shop, Lex skeptically asks if every displayed weapon is a fake. Smirking, the blacksmith reveals he hid one authentic masterpiece and offers it for free. Instantly fired up, Hiro violently declares he will find the hidden treasure. Mina and Norb decline, preferring their magic and church-issued maces over heavy blades. Shifting his intense gaze, Gordov directly challenges Lex to join the search. He confidently asserts that anyone who spots decoys should easily find the real sword. Swallowing hard under the giant stare, Lex realizes he is being intentionally provoked. Accepting the challenge, Lex politely steps back to let his friends guess first. Eager to win, Megumi and Hiro confidently grab their chosen blades. Gordov instantly rejects both, warning the rookies that superficial looks can be deceiving. Utterly defeated, the frustrated rookies dramatically beg their big brother to avenge them. Carefully scanning the racks, Lex hones in on a seemingly worn and dirty blade. Pointing directly at the grimy weapon, Lex calmly makes his choice while Hiro screams. Intrigued by the selection, Gordov asks Lex what drew his eye to it. Lex expertly explains the apparent dirt is merely clever camouflage hiding a perfectly forged weapon. Flashing a massive grin, Gordov confirms Lex successfully uncovered the only authentic weapon. The blacksmith mercilessly roasts the rookies for falling for his superficial tricks. Honoring his wager, Gordov gladly hands the legendary weapon over to Lex. He expresses deep satisfaction at finally meeting someone who understands true craftsmanship. Beaming with pride, Gordov eagerly offers to polish and decorate the masterpiece properly. Hiro and Megumi shower Lex with absolute worship for his incredible appraising skills. Blushing under the intense praise, Lex awkwardly insists it is nothing to admire. Turning back, Lex politely asks permission to gift the newly won masterpiece to Hiro. The entire room freezes in collective shock at the boy's unbelievably generous request. Hiro and Megumi instantly protest, shouting that giving it to a novice is a complete waste. Humbly accepting his weakness, Hiro insists Lex is far more capable of wielding it. Narrowing his eyes, Gordov bluntly states he absolutely refuses Lex's proposal. The towering dwarf warns that insulting a blacksmith requires a damn good explanation. Sweating bullets, Hiro frantically whispers for Lex to just accept the sword. Acknowledging the virtue of accepting gifts, Lex stands his ground and notes one exception. Staring directly into the blacksmith's eyes, Lex firmly refuses to accept an unused weapon. Intrigued by the boy's absolute confidence, Gordov aggressively demands to hear his reasoning. Drawing his trusted blade, Lex proudly declares he simply does not need another weapon. Gordov admits it is good to cherish a weapon, but Lex argues it would be incredibly cruel to throw his current sword away just for a new one. Crossing his heavy arms, Gordov insists he must inspect Lex's current weapon before he can accept the boy's rejection. The blacksmith proposes a wager, promising to give his masterpiece to Hiro if Lex's sword actually manages to impress him. However, Gordov warns that if the blade fails to convince him, Lex must wield the dwarf's weapon and give his own to the rookie. Gordov smugly points out that under these strict conditions, Lex technically would not be abandoning his old weapon. Before Lex can even process the bizarre logic, Hyro excitedly perks up at the chance to wield his idol's gear. Hyro passionately volunteers for the wager, desperately promising to carry on Lex's legendary legacy. Losing his patience, Gordov aggressively demands that Lex finally reveal his supposedly superior weapon. Reluctantly giving in, Lex slowly draws his personal blade for the massive blacksmith to inspect. Gordov stares intensely at the exposed steel, falling completely silent as he processes the weapon's quality. The hulking dwarf begins to tremble violently, his wide eyes locked onto the flawless craftsmanship. Sweat pouring down his face, Gordov stammers in absolute shock as his veteran mind utterly breaks. The blacksmith violently screams out, desperately demanding to know what kind of impossible artifact he is holding. He frantically examines the metal, completely bewildered by the impossibly smooth texture and entirely foreign forging method. Tears streaming down his face, Gordov wails that the blade is a literal, unparalleled work of art. Gripping the masterpiece tight, the blacksmith aggressively asks who in the world managed to create such perfection. Lex awkwardly raises his hand, sheepishly admitting that he actually forged the weapon himself. Gordov screams in sheer disbelief as Lex explains he learned the trade by exchanging monster materials at a local shop. Trembling under the dwarf's gaze, Lex internally notes that he actually mastered legendary blacksmithing techniques during his previous life. Dropping straight to his knees, Gordov fiercely begs Lex to take him in as his newest apprentice. Panicking at the dramatic display, Lex desperately tries to stop the legendary craftsman from aggressively bowing on the floor. Lex awkwardly lies that a dwarf acquaintance forcefully taught him the method, claiming warriors must learn to forge their own gear. Gordov loudly rejects the excuse, stating the blade's quality is so divine he would easily believe the dwarf king himself forged it. Utterly humiliated by Lex's skill, the dwarf happily surrenders his own sword to Hyro and desperately begs to learn Lex's secrets. Realizing the stubborn blacksmith will absolutely never stop kneeling, Lex nervously searches for a compromise. Lex finally agrees to teach Gordov how to make this specific sword, but firmly warns he will not teach anything beyond that. Tears of pure joy flooding his face, the massive blacksmith loudly thanks his brand new master. Hyro completely loses his mind with excitement, praising Lex for accidentally turning a legendary craftsman into a loyal subordinate. As a celebrating Hyro claims his free sword, an exhausted Lex silently vows to create a brutally hard training regimen for the loudmouth rookie. Introducing himself with quiet pride, John states he is a talented butler serving the esteemed Viscount Grimoire. He calmly notes it is nearly time for his lord to return from the royal auction. Before the lord arrives, John sets out on a strict mission to scout the mysterious adventurer who defeated the dragon. Frustrated by the guild's protective interference, he personally travels to negotiate after the target rejected their initial dinner invitation. Entering the Adventurer Guild, John skips the pleasantries and bluntly asks the receptionist if his target is present. The receptionist blinks in surprise, noting the adventurer was around just a moment ago. She adds that he likely already departed for a quest, leaving John temporarily stalled. Wondering about the elusive dragon slayer, John mentally curses the guild for hiding the hero's class and party size. Buzzing with eager anticipation, the butler quickens his pace to finally meet the legendary warrior. Scanning the bustling hall, John deduces the mighty dragon slayer must be standing right at the center of the crowd. A sudden, blinding radiance catches his eye, instantly confirming the presence of extraordinary equipment. He marvels at the sparkling armor shining like a precious jewel, knowing even an amateur could sense its immense value. Assuming this narcissistic warrior showing off to the crowd is his target, John confidently approaches the flashy adventurer. Excusing himself, John politely interrupts the bewildered man to ask for a brief moment of his time. John formally introduces himself as the loyal butler of Viscount Grimoire, the town's ruler. Smiling smoothly, the butler asks the imposing adventurer to reveal his name. Caught completely off guard, the nervous man introduces himself as Org. John explains he is seeking an adventurer who meets very specific criteria, prompting a confused Org to ask what business a lord wants with him. Gesturing gracefully, John flatters the warrior by noting he needs someone strong enough to wear such magnificent armor. Org flashes a massive, proud grin, clearly thrilled that someone recognized his brilliant gear. Boasting loudly, Org reveals his special armor is an exclusive masterpiece crafted by Master Gordov. Leaning in with pride, Org drops a bombshell by announcing the suit is actually forged from a genuine dragon scale. John's eyes widen as he realizes the recently auctioned dragon has not even had its parts distributed yet. Deducing the impossible truth, John realizes the only way Org could possess a scale is if he hunted a dragon himself. Smirking internally, John directly addresses Org as the Dragon Slayer and demands to know where he acquired the rare material. Sweating profusely, Org stammers out a miserable excuse about luckily stumbling upon the rare item during a random quest. John stares blankly at the sweating warrior, silently judging the incredibly poor lie. Figuring the man is hiding his identity for a specific reason, John calculates he can easily control Org by uncovering his secret. Pouring on the flattery, John praises Org as a first-rate adventurer for securing such legendary armor. He reveals Viscount Grimoire is actively seeking a strong knight and asks if Org wants the job, silently celebrating that the musclehead took the bait. Stunned by the massive opportunity, a flustered Org stammers in disbelief at the sudden knighthood offer. When Org expresses nervous hesitation about standing out, John smoothly promises the Lord can easily accommodate his needs. Pressing his advantage, the butler suggests a simple, pressure-free dinner with the Lord before any final decisions are made. John sweetens the deal by promising a lavish feast of incredibly delicious food. Completely won over by the promise of food, Org awkwardly agrees to the dinner invitation. Celebrating his flawless diplomatic victory, John mentally prepares to secure the warrior as a permanent vassal. The butler bows gracefully and excuses himself, arrogantly confident that manipulating this muscle-brained man will be effortless. Org stands completely dazed, his mind reeling as the elegant butler walks away. The guild erupts into chaotic whispers as the surrounding adventurers process Org's direct invitation from a noble. Watching from afar, an irritated Hyro clicks his tongue and loudly complains that the blind old man completely ignored his big brother. Lex smiles gently and tells his apprentice to relax, assuming the butler scouted Org purely for his actual combat abilities. Hyro furiously rejects that logic, shouting that the old man only noticed Org because of that insanely flashy dragon-scale armor. Brushing off the praise, Lex humbly points out he merely gave Org a single scale, believing it just acted as a minor conversation starter. Lex mentally dismisses the armor as a basic prototype made from his borrowed techniques, refusing to believe anyone would mistake it for top-tier gear. He rationalizes that Org only provided the scale in the first place just to score a free prototype from Gordov. Sweating nervously, Megui calls Lex incredibly dense and worries his massive misunderstandings are causing unnecessary chaos. Snapping the group back to reality, Hyro eagerly reminds Lex they need to complete a subjugation mission for his highly anticipated sword training. Lex chuckles and promises Hyro that consistent training might earn him a knighthood too, though the joke falls completely flat. Arriving at the training grounds, an energized Hyro eagerly asks if they are starting with practice swings or secret techniques. Megui immediately shoots down his excitement, mocking the idea that Lex would teach secret arts to such a clumsy rookie. Lex calmly commands attention, announcing their very first lesson will cover the absolute basics of body-strengthening magic. Hyro violently panics at the word magic, aggressively protesting that a pure warrior like him cannot cast spells. Correcting his apprentice, Lex patiently explains that while the overall quantity varies, every single human naturally possesses a flow of mana. Demonstrating his point, Lex narrows his eyes and forces a massive, concentrated surge of pure mana directly into his right arm. Clenching his glowing fist, the legendary master prepares to show his awestruck students the true power of focused energy. Lex begins his lesson, explaining that this technique is incredibly useful for all classes, not just warriors. He reveals the basis of body-strengthening magic, which involves enveloping the body in mana to drastically enhance strength, agility, and defense. Desperate, Hyro aggressively shakes his head, utterly convinced he cannot learn it. Chuckling lightly, Lex tries to reassure him that the magic is actually very easy once you learn to physically feel your own mana. Hyro violently screams in denial, absolutely refusing to believe Lex's casual claims. A shocked Norb demands to know how Lex cast the spell without uttering a single incantation. The rest of the team questions if they could ever reach that level, though Lex innocently insists it is not hard at all. Lex explains that body enhancement magic is simply about circulating internal mana without needing to process it into specific elemental attributes. Lex reveals that mastering this circulation technique acts as a perfect stepping stone for eventually casting all magic completely chantless. Hyro rolls his eyes, sarcastically mocking Lex for making such an impossibly complex concept sound trivial. Lex notes that Mina and Norb should learn the technique much faster since they are already experienced magic users. Turning to the melee fighters, he instructs Hyro and Megui to start purely by practicing how to feel their internal mana. Mina immediately begins meditating, focusing intently on her internal energy flow. Frustrated, Norb complains that while she can feel the mana, It completely disobeys her commands without a chant to guide it. Lex observes that their lifelong reliance on vocal chanting has severely crippled their ability to control raw mana manually. Meanwhile, Megumi groans in deep concentration, struggling to confirm if what she is sensing is actually mana. Lex silently deduces that Megui's thief intuition is already allowing her to vaguely sense the energy flow. He confidently predicts that Megumi will likely be the first among the rookies to successfully use the strengthening magic. However, Hiro's progress tells an entirely different, incredibly chaotic story. Screaming at the top of his lungs, Hiro wildly channels his energy and prepares to strike the earth. He violently slams his fist into the ground with a massive, desperate battle cry. Whining in pain as he shakes his bruised hand, Hiro completely fails to produce any magical effect, leaving Lex wondering how to properly teach him. Suddenly, Megumi unleashes a fierce kick that violently shatters the surrounding air. Norb follows up with a powerful, mana-infused strike of her own. The magic users celebrate their sudden success, with Mina noting the new strength will easily allow her to survive close-quarters ambushes. Megumi excitedly notes her defense skyrocketed, making the technique absolutely perfect for her dangerous stealth missions. Lex proudly observes that the magic naturally adapted to enhance the specific traits best suited for each individual's class. Crying dramatically, a battered Hiro begs Lex to tell him if he will ever actually succeed. Offering a gentle smile, Lex assures the defeated boy that he will absolutely master it with enough practice. Sniffling, Hiro looks up and asks if Lex had to go through this exact same brutal practice. A confused Lex tilts his head, wondering what exactly Hiro means by his question. Admiring his master's overwhelming power, Hiro eagerly asks for the details of Lex's original training methods. Lex reminisces about his first life, recalling a muscle-brained master who aggressively preached that pure fighting spirit could replace incantations. Recalling the master's wild screaming, Lex mentally rejects the insane fighting spirit theory and focuses on the real truth. Ignoring Hiro's waving hand, Lex silently reflects on how he eventually abandoned that nonsense and studied the fundamental laws of creation to become a sage. Snapping back to reality, Lex explains that his training involved intensely researching the core reasoning behind how magic fundamentally works. He lectures that truly understanding cause and effect allows a mage to artificially reproduce any desired result, leaving Hiro utterly confused. Trying to simplify the concept, Lex tells Hiro he must first understand what mana actually is before he can control it. Hiro whines that only talented magicians can understand mana, but Lex immediately points to Megumi to prove that even a non-magical thief can master it. Shifting tactics, Lex asks Hiro to remember what it feels like when Norb heals his injuries. Thinking back, Hiro awkwardly describes the healing sensation as a very slight fluffiness. Lex dramatically points at Hiro and excitedly declares that exact fluffy sensation is pure mana. Lex explains that every single cast of recovery magic naturally releases a small trace of excess mana into the target. Fully convinced, Hiro aggressively pumps his fist and vows to chase that fluffy feeling with all his might. Lex internally admits the fluffiness is actually processed healing energy, but decides explaining that technicality would just confuse the boy further. Lex banks on the placebo effect, hoping that tricking Hiro into believing he feels mana will eventually trigger a genuine breakthrough. Suddenly, a massive, violent explosion completely obliterates Hiro's position, leaving a smoking crater behind. The entire team cheers wildly from the sidelines, praising Hiro for finally successfully triggering his magic. Covered in soot, an absolutely furious Hiro screams at his friends for celebrating instead of worrying about his violent explosion. Lex awkwardly apologizes, silently noting that despite the catastrophic explosion, the training was technically a success. Hiro wildly channels his new magic, launching a powerful punch that shatters a massive tree into pieces. He follows up with a devastating kick, blasting another thick trunk into splinters while screaming in excitement. Laughing wildly, Hiro praises Lex as the absolute best, thrilled to finally wield such awesome power. Lex awkwardly thanks him for the compliment, but nervously begs him to stop needlessly destroying the forest. Megumi watches in sheer astonishment, praising Lex as a top-notch teacher for somehow managing to teach an idiot like Hiro how to cast magic. A blushing Lex humbly deflects the praise, but Megumi firmly insists the entire team has drastically ranked up in combat strength. Curious about the earlier chaos, Megumi casually asks why Hiro violently exploded during his first attempt. Lex calmly explains that Hiro accumulated far too much raw mana inside his body without properly redirecting it. He likens body enhancement magic to pouring water into a leather flask, warning that accumulating too much internal pressure will cause it to burst. Lex confirms that the violent explosion was simply Hyro's overcharged body forcibly detonating the trapped mana. Lex teaches that whenever someone accumulates massive amounts of mana, they absolutely must create a safe exit for it. A realization strikes Megumi, and she quickly asks if that required exit is actually how normal spells are cast. Smiling proudly, Lex confirms that processing and releasing internal mana is the very definition of casting magic. Lex casually drops a bombshell, explaining that directly releasing accumulated mana is the fundamental theory behind casting spells completely without incantations. He warns Mina that simply releasing raw mana will not create a spell unless she specifically processes an elemental attribute into it first. Mina stares in absolute shock, utterly blown away by the revelation that she can actually bypass chanting entirely. Lex wonders why Mina's previous teachers never taught her this basic principle, assuming they just subjected her to brutal Spartan training instead. Turning to Nob, Lex kindly asks if the priestess is also interested in learning chantless magic. Before she can answer, Nob nervously points out a much more pressing issue happening behind Lex. Lex turns around to see a completely paralyzed Hyro standing frozen like a statue. Chuckling softly, Lex explains that Hyro simply exhausted his mana pool, noting it is a common mistake for rookies who get overly excited. Nob sighs in deep relief, admitting she genuinely thought the boy had suffered a sudden, fatal illness. Confused, Nob asks if body enhancement magic naturally consumes a massive amount of mana. Suddenly, Megumi violently coughs up a huge cloud of dust and drops directly to her knees. Lex panics and rushes over, asking the collapsed thief what is wrong. Megumi awkwardly apologizes, admitting she also burned through all her mana by recklessly jumping around the forest. Lex frantically apologizes, taking full responsibility for forgetting to warn them about the physical consequences of mana exhaustion. Right on cue, an exhausted Mina collapses into the dirt alongside her teammates. Lex groans in sheer disbelief, realizing he accidentally drained 3 out of his 4 students to the point of collapse. Sweating nervously, Lex decides their next lesson must absolutely focus on proper mana management. Meanwhile, a grand carriage pulls up to the imposing gates of Viscount Grimoire's lavish estate. The stoic feudal lord steps out of the carriage, completely exhausted from his long journey to the capital. John bows deeply to welcome his master, noting that the lord successfully acquired his highly desired target. Grimoire scowls heavily, complaining that winning the auction cost him an utterly astronomical sum of money. Slipping up, the lord accidentally curses while reflecting on the brutal bidding war. He angrily recounts how Baron Guttersea relentlessly drove up the price just to harass him. Despite the massive financial blow, Grimoire proudly reveals he successfully secured the legendary dragon core for his daughter, Celia. John nods in understanding, confirming the core will massively boost the accuracy of Celia's unique foresight ability, which is vital to their territory's survival. The butler proudly notes that while many fortune tellers exist, Lady Celia's mastery of foresight is on an entirely different level. He emphasizes that her predictions are so flawlessly accurate that the entire management of Viscount Grimoire's lands depends heavily on her visions. The loyal butler quietly wonders how raw dragon materials are actually utilized in fortune-telling. Dismissing the technicalities, Grimoire firmly states that the core's ability to enhance Celia's foresight is the only thing that matters. Shifting the conversation, the Lord intensely interrogates John regarding the progress of their covert recruitment mission. Bowing with absolute confidence, John assures his master that he successfully contacted the target and prepared the final negotiations. Grimoire narrows his eyes, quietly questioning whether the mysterious adventurer will actually accept their grand offer. Analyzing the target, John deduces the warrior secretly craves power but deliberately seeks a low-profile position to hide some unknown guilt. Brushing off the warrior's hidden motives, Grimoire coldly declares that the man's personal intentions do not matter either way. The imposing lord emphasizes their absolute duty to intercept the devastating calamity that Celia predicted. John grimaces slightly, asking if his master is referring to the terrible disaster Lady Celia previously warned them about. Grimoire admits he initially doubted his daughter's horrific vision of their entire territory being intentionally burned to ashes. He solemnly notes the sudden, unnatural appearances of high-level monsters like the dragon and evil boars validate the growing threat. Clenching his fists, Grimoire states that such deadly anomalies appearing so rapidly cannot possibly be a mere coincidence. Staring out the window, the Lord concludes that a sinister, unseen force is actively manipulating their very land. John listens in stoic silence, fully grasping the terrifying gravity of his master's deduction. Refusing to lose their greatest asset to rival nobles, Grimoire aggressively orders John to prepare the welcoming banquet immediately. Calming down, The feudal lord finally asks his butler to reveal the legendary warrior's name. Several days later, Lady Celia gently calls out to her busy father in his study. She urgently approaches his desk, requesting to share a critical update regarding her magical foresight. Grimoire immediately drops his paperwork and leans forward, anxiously asking if she experienced another vision. Celia happily reports the dragon core massively clarified her visions, making Grimoire celebrate his ridiculously expensive investment. Clutching the precious artifact, she expresses profound gratitude to her father for securing such immense power. She proudly reveals that her precognitive accuracy has completely skyrocketed by several staggering magnitudes. Shocked by the massive power boost, Grimoire desperately demands to know what new future she witnessed. Celia hesitates, her gentle face suddenly darkening with profound, gripping fear. Sensing her deep terror, Grimoire gently calls her name to break the heavy silence. She shakily describes witnessing an apocalyptic swarm of horrifying, unknown monsters completely overtaking their lands. Grimoire gasps in pure terror, utterly paralyzed by the sheer scale of the forecasted apocalypse. He solemnly accepts the grim reality, knowing his daughter's amplified visions are absolutely inescapable. Finding a sliver of hope, Grimoire proudly states that hiring their new adventurer was the perfect countermeasure. He explains he deliberately recruited a powerful warrior specifically to combat these rising anomalies. He reveals the recruit is the legendary dragon slayer, leaving Celia gasping in absolute awe. Grimoire confirms that her powerful dragon core was personally harvested by this exact, unrivaled warrior. Celia marvels quietly, completely overwhelmed by the sheer thought of a human capable of slaying a dragon. John respectfully steps forward, eagerly preparing to add to the warrior's mythical resume. The butler expertly details the 4 flawless evil boars recently acquired from the bustling market. He enthusiastically reveals that the exact same hero flawlessly slaughtered the entire demonic herd. John smoothly adds that an adventurer also neutralized the stealthy dark blob infiltrating their town. Grimoire confidently concludes the mythical dragon slayer must be responsible for that miraculous defense as well. Celia's eyes sparkle with immense, undeniable hope as she visualizes a true savior protecting their home. Desperate for salvation, the young lady eagerly begs her father to reveal the hero's name. Grimoire solemnly drops the name Org, completely unaware of the massive misunderstanding. Celia passionately declares the muscle-brained Org as the absolute savior of their doomed land. Meanwhile, an entirely oblivious Org sneezes violently while traversing a dark, distant dungeon. He rubs his nose, stupidly wondering if someone is gossiping about him while his annoyed team denies it. The narrative mockingly concludes that the entire territory's survival now ironically rests on Org's completely clueless shoulders. Hyro stretches his arms, happily sighing that it has been quite a while since he moved around this much. Sweating heavily, Norb notes that while body-strengthening magic is amazing, relying on it too much as a rearguard will be incredibly scary. Utterly exhausted, Mina begs to know if they really plan on continuing the brutal training. Lex pauses the session, agreeing they should rest to recover mana and intentionally practice while running on fumes to learn the magic's minimum activation cost. Hyro suddenly jumps back to his feet, cheerfully declaring he has completely recovered. A baffled Megui points out his ridiculous energy levels, but Hyro simply claims his tiredness magically vanished after the short break. Flexing proudly, Hyro credits his rapid recovery to being Lex's absolute #1 student. Lex smiles mysteriously, gently hinting that Hyro's claim might actually be somewhat true. Lex points out that while warriors naturally have high stamina, he should theoretically possess significantly more stamina than Hyro. Raising a shaky hand, Lex admits he has not recovered at all and still cannot move freely. Shocked, Megui asks if Lex's teaching method is the secret behind Hyro's unnatural recovery. Lex waves off the assumption, denying that he explicitly taught Hyro any secret stamina techniques. Suddenly struck by a theory, Lex commands Hyro to activate his body-strengthening magic. Hyro immediately powers up, loudly chanting his ridiculous fluffy mantra. Watching closely, Lex confirms his suspicion, stating that Hyro actually added a specific attribute to his magic. Lex explains to the group that processing standard colorless mana by adding an attribute creates specialized spells like fire or wind magic. He clarifies that standard body-strengthening magic exclusively relies on circulating raw, colorless mana throughout the body. A stunned Mina realizes that Hyro completely bypassed the standard spell and successfully infused an elemental attribute directly into his enhancement. Lex smiles and confirms Hyro is using attribute enhancement, which is the highly advanced next step of basic enhancement magic. Hyro's eyes light up with sheer excitement as he repeats the incredibly cool name of his new technique. Realizing he unlocked an advanced skill by complete accident, Hiro pauses to process the sheer absurdity of his own talent. Pointing to himself, Hiro loudly asks if he is actually a genuine, unparalleled prodigy. A furious Megumi grabs him by the collar, screaming at the stupid rookie not to get ahead of himself. Watching them bicker, Lex calmly explains that Hiro successfully learned the magic by visualizing Norb's fluffy recovery spells. Lex hypothesizes that Hiro's incredibly strong visualization accidentally processed his colorless mana straight into the holy mana of recovery magic. Norb completely breaks down, her religious worldview shattered by the realization that divine recovery magic is not powered by faith at all. Lex further details that Hiro's specific spell is classified as Heal Boost, joining other elemental variants like Flame Boost and Spark Boost. Intrigued, Megumi asks if there is a unique physical enhancement for every single magical element. Lex nods, confirming the 6 core attributes, Earth, Water, Fire, Wind, Light, and Dark, can all be weaponized. He adds that advanced casters can even apply defensive attributes for poison resistance or use derived elements like lightning and ice. Megumi marvels at the massive variety, realizing attribute enhancement is incredibly versatile depending on how it is applied. Fully hyped up, Hiro vows to train endlessly until he can master every single elemental boost in existence. Ignoring the exhausted magic users begging for a break, Hiro violently punches the air and demands to resume training immediately. Pointing at the sky, Hiro brags that he will soon be strong enough to casually slaughter giant monsters just like his big brother. Megumi groans, attempting to scold the stupid boy for assuming legendary strength comes so easily. Suddenly, a violent, deafening tremor completely shatters the peaceful forest. The entire team freezes in sheer terror as an overwhelming, monstrous pressure crushes down on the area. Sweating profusely, Mina frantically asks Lex to identify the source of the terrifying, oppressive aura. Hiro screams for his master, desperately demanding to know what kind of nightmare just arrived. Staring into the dense woods, Lex calmly identifies the colossal threat as a cursed viper. A panicked Megumi points out the horrific beast is significantly larger than the demonic evil boars Lex previously slaughtered. Gripped by terror, Mina desperately asks Lex what kind of horrifying monster a cursed viper actually is. Lex grimly reveals the massive serpent is not from their realm, but is an actual monster native to the demon world. He coldly notes that even with powerful summoning magic, pulling a beast of that impossible size into this world should be physically impossible. Attempting to mask his fear with bravado, Hiro shouts that its size does not matter and stupidly suggests they just kill it. Flexing his glowing arms, Hiro arrogantly declares their new body-strengthening magic will easily carry them to victory. Lex immediately shoots down the reckless plan, firmly warning the boy not to try it. Pointing at the massive beast, Lex explicitly highlights the word cursed in its name. He warns that the untouchable monster constantly releases a highly toxic miasma and will instantly curse anyone who dares to make physical contact. Staring down the demonic serpent, Lex grimly concludes that the horrifying beast is universally known as the Night Slayer. A party member explains that this terrifying monster weakens its prey before placing a powerful curse on anyone who touches it. Panicking over the beast's overwhelming strength, another member notes that the massive viper moves with unexpected speed. Realizing only 3 of them use magic, someone desperately suggests retreating to town to report the crisis to the guild. Cursing their luck, the leader admits that fighting demon world monsters is an A-rank mission far beyond their current capabilities. Refusing to back down, Lex steps forward and boldly declares he will intercept the creature himself. He explains that he must stop the unnervingly fast monster here, ignoring his teammates' frantic warnings about the deadly curse. A teammate frantically protests, warning Lex that his magical strength is simply not enough to lift the inevitable curse. Unfazed, Lex tells them not to worry, casually noting that hiring a high priest for a cure would be too expensive anyway. Stepping into the terrifying beast's path, he promises to show everyone the devastating power of body-strengthening magic. The massive viper fiercely rears back its hideous head, preparing to strike the lone adventurer down with lethal force. Lex instantly activates Holy Boost, completely cladding his body in a radiant and highly protective magical aura. As brilliant light totally envelops him, he prepares to demonstrate the overwhelming advantage of this specific holy attribute. He explains that this holy enhancement massively increases absolute physical attack power against all evil beings. Rushing fiercely forward, he adds that the radiant aura also possesses the undeniable power to repel dark curses entirely. The gigantic beast lunges forward with vicious speed, violently snapping its massive jaws directly at his unprotected head. Pivoting with absolutely perfect timing, Lex gracefully dodges the lethal bite by a mere hair's breadth. Channeling all his augmented momentum, he draws his glowing right fist back for a truly devastating counterattack. Launching himself upward in a blinding blur of holy light, he instantly closes the distance to the beast's exposed side. Driving his charged fist forward, he unleashes a tightly concentrated burst of holy energy directly into the giant creature. Screaming that this is the absolute end, he violently buries his glowing strike deep into the monster's thick scales. A colossal shockwave violently erupts through the surrounding air as his holy punch brutally connects with the monster. The gigantic beast shrieks in sheer agony as the explosive magical force completely shatters its dark biological defenses. Landing smoothly back on his feet, Lex casually mutters that he might have sent the heavy creature flying too far. Surveying the absolutely crushed monster, his utterly awestruck companions can only stammer his name in sheer disbelief. Catching his breath, Lex explains that mastering body-strengthening magic effortlessly unlocks various effects to easily defeat such enemies. He turns to an astonished Hyro, encouraging the young healer by promising he will eventually reach this exact level of power. Still physically trembling, a party member anxiously asks Lex if the deadly threat of demon world monsters is finally gone. Staring out into the untamed wilderness, Lex shakes his head and grimly confirms that the imminent danger remains. He thoughtfully explains that the massive monster's sheer size and mindless ferocity make it completely unsuitable for standard summoning spells. Deducing the horrifying truth, he logically concludes that a physical gate connecting directly to the demon world must exist nearby. This sudden dark revelation violently shocks the entire party, sending a massive wave of absolute panic rippling through their ranks. Lex theorizes that the mysterious gate is heavily cloaked by barrier magic, wondering who would orchestrate such a massive disaster. Supremely confident, he boldly announces his plan to instantly destroy the hidden portal while harvesting the dead Viper's materials. As Lex casually strolls off, a fellow party member aggressively grabs Hyro in a sudden burst of overwhelming excitement. The young boy violently flinches as his ecstatic friend excitedly screams about how incredibly awesome their heroic leader truly is. Gushing with absolute admiration, the friend rapidly compares Lex to a legendary hero who effortlessly obliterated a giant monstrous threat. Highly fired up, the deeply inspired group loudly vows to grow stronger and eagerly sprints after Lex to help. Just as they loudly and excitedly call out to him, a sudden oppressive shift in the atmosphere violently halts them. Hyro violently shivers as an utterly unnatural and completely ridiculous chill washes over his entire fragile body. Absolute panic sets in as the stunned adventurers rapidly struggle to comprehend the terrifying physical pressure crushing down on them. Pointing frantically into the hazy distance, a totally terrified member loudly screams that something truly massive is rapidly approaching. The group stares up in sheer helpless horror as an enormously terrifying shadow entirely eclipses the bright sky above them. Completely paralyzed by overwhelming supernatural terror, they can only weakly mutter in total disbelief at the monstrous entity looming overhead. Staring in sheer terror, the adventurers recoil at the sight of the newly arrived threat. Someone desperately screams to run before the urgent command is violently cut short. Absolute panic sets in as the party members suddenly realize they are completely paralyzed. One adventurer realizes this is not a spell, but rather their bodies freezing up entirely on their own. He rapidly determines that the overwhelming physical pressure of the enemy's ridiculous mana is causing their paralysis. Realizing a massive attack is incoming, the totally frozen adventurers aggressively brace for certain death. Accepting their grim fate, the paralyzed team helplessly watches their impending doom rapidly approach. Suddenly, a fierce battle cry rings out as Megui violently shoves her teammate completely out of the blast zone. Knocked free from the overwhelming pressure, the shocked adventurer suddenly realizes his dangerous paralysis is broken. Feeling deeply pathetic for freezing up under pressure, he quickly turns to thank Megui for saving his life. The heavy battlefield dust slowly begins to clear as he desperately calls out his brave savior's name. Absolute horror violently washes over his face when he spots Megui brutally injured on the ground. Snapping rapidly into action, the frantic adventurer violently yells for Norb to immediately heal their fallen comrade. Hovering menacingly above them, the dark figure arrogantly remarks on his complete failure to wipe them out in a single strike. Looking down at the desperate group, he mockingly praises the humans for proving to be such incredibly tough living beings. The villain casually explains he was only chasing the cursed viper and never expected to encounter humans so soon. He loudly complains that all his elaborate trouble hiding inside the magical barrier has now become completely pointless. Staring upward at the massive bat wings on his back, the terrifying realization dawns that this creature is an actual demon. The party is totally stunned, completely unable to believe that terrifying monsters from ancient fairy tales truly exist. Catching their utter disbelief, the arrogant demon pauses for a brief moment before logically piecing together the grim truth. Realizing humans have terribly short lifespans, he furiously deduces they cowardly erased demons from their history books after their ancient war. Deeply enraged by this massive historical insult, the demon furiously calls them total idiots for daring to forget their greatest nemesis. Desperate for any tactical answers, a completely terrified adventurer frantically demands to know the demon's ultimate purpose. Laughing cruelly at their transparent stalling tactics, the demon boldly declares their pitiful attempt to save Megumi is officially over. Surging with absolute dark malice, he coldly promises that every single human present is going to die regardless. Refusing to surrender, the heavily pressed adventurers aggressively brace themselves for the imminent fight. The villain suddenly flinches as a rapid blur of movement unexpectedly breaks his fierce concentration. Utilizing powerful body-enhancing magic, a fierce warrior aggressively closes the distance to perfectly match the demon's speed. Mocking the wingless warrior's reckless assault, the demon casually evades the aggressive strike by floating higher into the air. Seizing the absolute perfect opening, a hidden mage instantly unleashes a devastating fire lance spell directly at the aerial target. Landing a brilliant chantless magical surprise attack, the mage proudly gloats while his furious teammate realizes he was just used as bait. The arrogant mage loudly defends his dangerous bait tactic as a brilliant strategy that single-handedly secured their absolute victory. The heavy smoke completely clears to reveal an unharmed demon, leaving the horrified mage realizing his massive spell was totally useless. Laughing maniacally, the demon completely dismisses modern magic and boldly assumes their victory over the Viper was just a lucky fluke. Raising his hand with lethal intent, the villain violently unleashes a concentrated blast of dark energy as vicious payback. Channeling his physical reflexes, the desperate warrior heavily manages to swiftly dodge the terrifying blast just in the nick of time. Sneering with absolute total confidence, the demon mockingly asks if the fool actually believed he successfully dodged the brutal attack. Absolute frantic panic sets in as the warrior violently realizes the deadly energy blast is actively tracking his physical movements. Cornered with absolutely nowhere left to run, the totally desperate adventurer violently resolves to take a massive gamble. He rapidly screams for Mina to cast her body-strengthening magic, prompting a highly confused but immediate agreement from the shocked girl. Grabbing his shocked teammate, Hiro forcefully commands her to hold on as he prepares a sudden maneuver. Deeply confused by his sudden aggression, his bewildered friend stammers in absolute shock. Tossing Mina forcefully out of harm's way, the brave youth violently charges directly toward the lethal enemy. Floating above the battlefield, the arrogant demon mockingly asks if the young boy is trying to sacrifice himself to let his friends escape. Glaring fiercely at his powerful foe, Hiro violently screams at the villain not to underestimate his determination. Scoffing at the foolish frontal assault, the towering demon confidently declares the boy will perish before even reaching him. Refusing to back down, Hiro furiously vows that he just needs to land a single solid punch before he dies. Unleashing a brutal surge of dark energy, the demon happily obliges and orders the foolish human to die. A devastating blast of dark magic completely engulfs Hiro, tearing mercilessly through his defenses as the monster orders him to begone. Pushing through the agonizing magical onslaught, the fierce youth stubbornly refuses to fall just yet. Bursting dramatically from the thick smoke, Hiro violently lunges directly toward his airborne enemy. The arrogant demon recoils in absolute shock, completely caught off guard by the young boy's miraculous survival. Winding up his glowing fist, Hiro fiercely yells at the stunned creature as he rapidly closes in. Channeling every ounce of his remaining physical strength, the young warrior aggressively crosses the final gap in a blinding flash. The terrifying demon violently grimaces as the heavily bruised human swiftly invades his personal space. Cocking his heavily augmented arm back, Hiro prepares to unleash absolutely everything he has left. With a deafening roar, the young hero violently buries his heavy fist straight into the demon's stunned face. Following through with the massive physical strike, Hiro furiously demands to know how his enemy liked that brutal attack. Hitting the ground gracefully, Hiro joyfully calls out to Norb that their desperate tactical plan was a complete success. Watching safely from the sidelines, his relieved teammate enthusiastically confirms their absolute triumph. Flashing a confident smirk, Hiro happily reveals to the surviving team that his reckless assault was actually a coordinated trap. He excitedly explains that he exchanged secret signals with Norb right after heavily tossing Mina to safety. Diving intentionally into the demon's lethal blast, Hyro entirely trusted Norb to instantly cast a powerful defensive spell on him. Stacking his newly learned body-strengthening magic, Norb's layered shield, and leftover healing magic, he boldly bet his entire life on those 3 defenses. Throwing his arms up in absolute victory, Hyro happily celebrates the complete success of his incredibly dangerous gamble. He immediately winces in sheer pain, casually admitting that his battered body is absolutely screaming in agony despite the magical shields. Pumping his fist into the air, the proud youth powerfully declares that he is still breathing against all odds. Suddenly, a furious roar violently echoes through the tense air as the deeply humiliated demon swiftly recovers from the punch. Burning with absolute murderous rage, the towering villain aggressively commands the mere humans not to get cocky. Oozing dark and terrifying intent, the monster cruelly vows to brutally slaughter every single one of them. Seeing the completely unharmed demon, Hyro heavily curses his luck and frantically wonders if they are truly too weak to win. Taunting their pathetic foolishness, the demon cruelly promises to make the terrified adventurers actively wish they had died sooner. Unbothered by the terrifying threat, Hyro simply smiles and proudly announces that he has successfully bought enough time for his leader. Deeply confused by the boy's sudden confidence, the arrogant demon is entirely blindsided by a mysterious presence directly behind him. Smirking triumphantly, Hyro warns the monster that the man standing behind him is the real absolute nightmare. Erupting violently from the heavy shadows, Lex unleashes a spectacular, earth-shattering physical attack accompanied by a massive battle cry. Caught completely off guard, the arrogant demon violently screams in sheer agony as Lex's colossal blow brutally connects. Landing gracefully on the ruined battlefield, Lex casually apologizes to his battered team for arriving a little late. Chuckling softly through his intense physical pain, an exhausted Hyro happily passes the ultimate combat baton to his invincible big brother. The intense battle reaches a critical turning point as the dust settles. Lex lands dramatically in the ruins, relieved he arrived just in time to help. He explains a bad feeling urged him to rush back after harvesting the Viper. Surveying the threat, he admits he never expected to face humanity's demonic enemy. Knowing the blasted monster will return, Lex rapidly prioritizes checking on his party. He thankfully notes Noel and Mina remain unharmed despite exhausting their mana reserves. Glancing back, he feels massive relief seeing Megui receiving urgent medical treatment. Shifting his gaze, he finds Hyro bravely bearing the absolute worst battle wounds. Surging with determination, Lex vows to heal them before the demon strikes again. Thrusting his hands forward, he aggressively unleashes a powerful long-range healing spell. The stunned adventurers gasp in amazement as radiant magic instantly closes their wounds. A completely healed Hyro emotionally thanks his leader and steps back safely. Stepping to the front line, Lex fiercely declares he will handle the demonic creature. Clenching his fists, Hyro admits his strong desire to assist in the fight. Refusing to be a burden, the boy entirely yields frontline duties to Lex. Flashing a warm smile, Lex gently tells the anxious boy not to worry. Radiating absolute confidence, he forcefully demands his party leave the monster to him. Bursting from the debris, the enraged demon violently screams at the inferior humans. Lex cruelly mocks the towering creature for being easily beaten by those humans. Boiling with murderous wrath, the humiliated monster violently orders him to shut up. Channeling dark energy, the demon furiously vows to destroy them in his world. Tracking the attack, Lex completely dismisses it as a standard demonic dark flash. Sensing pathetic magical output, the hero wonders if he faces a low-class grunt. Peering past the monster, Lex suddenly realizes the dark vortex is the real threat. Analyzing its magical signature, he rapidly concludes the gateway connects to the demon world. He understands the open portal massively outweighs the weak demon guarding it. Fearing massive city destruction, Lex vows to obliterate both targets instantly. Preparing to charge, a brilliant tactical realization completely halts his momentum. Lining up his attack, he notes the demon sits perfectly aligned with the gate. Seizing the opportunity, he decides to exterminate both massive threats with one strike. Gripping his sword, Lex casually mutters it is finally time to get serious. Igniting his massive aura, the warrior launches himself toward the terrified enemy. Channeling divine power, he commands his magic sword to activate its lethal capabilities. Screaming Dimension Break, he unleashes a blast that makes the stunned demon shriek. The terrifying spatial cut activates, disregarding physics to instantly sever everything in sight. Tearing reality, the unstoppable attack entirely nullifies all physical and magical barriers. Lowering his smoking blade, Lex happily expresses relief his large-scale spell worked perfectly. Turning back, he he cheerfully announces the complete extermination of the demonic threat. His heroic smile falters as his traumatized friends stare back in stunned silence. Shattering the quiet, Hiro humbly admits his skills are nothing compared to Lex. The shell-shocked adventurers agree nobody will believe Lex obliterated a gate instantly. Arriving at the guild later, Alma happily greets Lex entering the building. She enthusiastically announces the massive bounties for slaying the dragon and boars have arrived. Shuffling paperwork, she explains she is combining the bounties with the Lord's payment. While Hiro loudly cheers, Lex humbly doubts a green dragon is worth a fortune. Heavily sighing, Alma fiercely reminds him a mature green dragon is a legendary threat. Urging him toward a private room, she explains public payouts invite violent trouble. As Hiro whines about missing the reveal, Alma strictly scolds his guild etiquette. Shrieking in embarrassment, Hiro deeply regrets adopting the dramatic team name. Waving off the rules, Lex casually welcomes his party into the private room. Reasoning his party will hound him anyway, Lex decides to show them the truth. Resigning completely, the defeated receptionist heavily sighs and finally relents to his request. Gesturing gracefully down the hallway, she firmly guides the highly excited group forward. Standing professionally behind a table, Alma officially readies the massive auction rewards. Staring confused at a tiny pouch, Hiro innocently wonders if it merely holds spare change. Handing over the massive reward, Alma reveals the payout includes 20 platinum coins and a feudal lord's bonus. Missing the currency type, a confused Hiro loudly complains that 20 gold coins is a terribly low payout. Leaning over the counter, Alma excitedly corrects the boy by shouting that the reward is paid in valuable platinum coins. Scratching his head, Lex casually asks if platinum coins are simply a special currency used when carrying gold becomes cumbersome. Flashing an amused smirk, Alma playfully asks if Lex actually comprehends the staggering conversion rate of a single platinum piece. Lex hesitates briefly, actively searching his deep memories to recall the exact monetary value of the rare currency. Bursting with realization, Norb loudly interjects that a single platinum coin equals an absolutely massive 10,000 gold pieces. Shifting to a professional tone, Alma explains that high-end auctions meticulously sell every single monster part separately for maximum profit. Because of this highly efficient process, almost every single piece of the mighty dragon was converted directly into massive wealth. She notes wealthy bidders fought fiercely over specific components, leaving Lex baffled since it was just a standard green dragon. Moving smoothly down the official ledger, Alma happily confirms the massive evil boars also sold flawlessly to eager noblemen. Staring at the official paperwork, Lex still finds the final combined sum unusually massive for a standard monster hunt. Catching his mild suspicion, Alma clarifies that the generous direct payment from the local feudal lord makes up a massive portion. Blinking in complete surprise, a totally confused Lex asks if adventurers normally receive massive bonus rewards for exterminating dangerous threats. Alma quickly explains that noble lords happily offer massive bounties to mighty heroes who successfully restore total peace to their territories. Processing the completely logical explanation, Lex still quietly suspects the lord's immense financial generosity is unnaturally large. Pushing his mild doubts aside, he genuinely praises the feudal lord as a truly great noble who deeply cares for his people. Smiling warmly at the incredibly fortunate situation, Lex confidently declares he will gladly accept the hefty financial reward. Staring awestruck at his invincible leader, Hiro loudly praises Lex, noting standard D-rank adventurers could never earn such absolute wealth. Sliding the payment forward, Alma strictly clarifies that the final total remains after completely deducting the mandatory 8% guild listing fee. Presenting 2 heavy bags, she explains the small pouch holds 18 platinum coins while the massive sack contains 4,000 gold coins. Noting the absolutely massive physical weight, Alma highly recommends safely depositing the vast sum directly into the secure guild bank. Smiling politely at her helpful suggestion, Lex casually declines by revealing he possesses a highly convenient magic bag for secure storage. Panicking slightly at losing massive future profits, Alma frantically begs him to keep bringing legendary corpses to their guild. Averting his eyes with a knowing smile, Lex silently realizes the enthusiastic receptionist desperately wants those incredibly lucrative listing fees. Struck by a sudden brilliant realization, Lex happily remembers he already has another massive monster corpse actively waiting to be sold. He casually explains the highly dangerous situation to Alma, politely asking if she can successfully auction off the newly acquired beast. Utterly shocked by his relentless efficiency, Alma rapidly realizes the invincible hero has already slain another legendary giant. Her shock instantly morphs into burning enthusiasm as she eagerly spots another glorious chance to generate massive guild profits. Hesitating slightly, Lex warns her that the beast is a cursed viper, asking if dismantling it poses a lethal hazard. Waving off his deep concerns, Elma cheerfully reassures the hero that cursed vipers completely stop releasing their deadly dark curse upon dying. She logically compares the residual curse to Hyro unconsciously releasing healing magic, actively making the deceased monster completely safe to handle. Suddenly processing Lex's completely casual words, Elma begins to violently stammer in utter sheer terrifying disbelief. Trembling with absolute pure terror, she frantically asks him to repeat the horrific part about a literal demon summoning a monster. Completely missing her violently rising panic, Lex entirely casually confirms the apocalyptic demonic invasion as if it were a totally normal Tuesday. Utterly shattered by the absolute terrifying truth, Elma unleashes a highly deafening shriek that violently shakes the entire guild hall. Meanwhile, deep inside a grand manor, a frantic young girl named Celia violently sprints down the long hallway toward her noble father. Spinning around in total surprise, the heavily concerned feudal lord rapidly asks his violently panting daughter what is entirely wrong. Catching her entirely ragged breath, Celia wildly announces that the highly terrifying disaster she previously foresaw has completely vanished. She enthusiastically explains that the horrific future timeline where vicious monsters violently overrun their peaceful land has been entirely erased. Completely and utterly stunned by this absolutely sudden miracle, her father violently demands she immediately repeat the incredible news. Calming down slightly, Celia fully explains her powerful foresight magic showed absolute destruction earlier but is now completely clear. Weeping with overwhelming total relief, the desperate feudal lord asks if their territory is safe, and she warmly confirms a peaceful future. Overcome with entirely profound emotion, the highly stressed nobleman immediately collapses into heavy, joyful, and completely unrestrained sobs. Gathering his absolute sheer composure, the incredibly relieved lord firmly declares this highly miraculous turn of events to be fantastic news. Looking deeply pensive, he rapidly realizes this massive shift in destiny happened right after he hired a specific highly formidable warrior. Clenching his fist with total supreme confidence, the entirely ecstatic feudal lord firmly mutters that his initial instincts were absolutely correct. The entirely amazed lord firmly assumes the mighty warrior brilliantly deduced the hidden disaster and swiftly eliminated the total threat. Filled with entirely immense gratitude, he strictly decides he must immediately prepare a massive reward for the legendary dragon slayer. He entirely praises the mighty adventurer's brilliance, marveling at how the highly skilled hero sensed the impending doom from vague words. Brimming with absolute admiration, the highly grateful lord confidently declares that such a legendary hero will undoubtedly be promoted to S rank soon. The adventurers anxiously process Elma's sudden, terrified outburst. The receptionist weakly assures them that her panicked reaction is perfectly normal. Pausing slightly, Hyro mentions he once read something vaguely familiar about a cursed viper. Elma stares blankly at the massive viper head Lex casually placed on her counter. She frantically commands them to sit tight while she desperately fetches her superior. As she dashes off, the team nervously murmurs about the sudden emergency. Lex casually calls out to Elma, completely failing to grasp the gravity of the situation. A few minutes later, an annoyed guild chief Barkley marches in, questioning the children's presence. Trembling uncontrollably, Elma desperately stammers, trying to explain the apocalyptic monster corpse resting nearby. Elma officially introduces Guild Chief Barkley, explaining the situation goes entirely beyond her standard authority. The party loudly gasps, stunned that a massive big shot personally arrived to handle the matter. Barkley confidently greets them, officially announcing himself as the current head of the Adventurers Guild. The heavily nervous adventurers politely introduce themselves while Lex calmly shares his own name. Visibly irritated, Barkley asks Elma why she interrupted his busy schedule just to meet some kids. Furious at his total laziness, Elma aggressively yells at the former A-rank adventurer to finally do his proper job. The stunned party quietly marvels at Barkley's deeply impressive past as a legendary A-rank adventurer. Elma rapidly explains that branch chiefs are strictly required to have prior A-rank combat experience. Bursting with sudden pride, Barkley loudly boasts about his amazing past, totally ignoring Elma's intense frustration. Shifting to a serious tone, Elma quickly informs him that a deadly cursed viper was found near town. Shocked entirely out of his confident state, Barkley loudly demands an immediate explanation for the demonic beast. After Elma assures him the beast is dead, Barkley furiously demands she instantly post an emergency quest. Panic rapidly rising, The chief frantically suggests immediately rallying all available magicians and highly skilled priests. He aggressively demands to know if the insane report about the demonic threat is completely true. When Elmer reveals a demon and a dark gate were also confirmed, Barkley furiously screams they must immediately alert the government army. His utter panic completely halts when Elmer calmly drops the bombshell that both the demon and gate are already exterminated. Disbelieving the massive news, Barkley strictly warns his receptionist that this is an incredibly bad joke. Highly defensive, Hiro rapidly vouches for his invincible leader while Lex casually offers to show the actual corpse. Dismissing the entire crazy tale, Barkley assumes it was merely a mutated snake and orders them to the disassembly plant. The wide-eyed adventurers eagerly follow the chief, deeply amazed by the massive, exclusive guild facility. Barkley proudly explains the restricted plant is strictly reserved for high-ranked teams handling massive legendary hunts. Gesturing impatiently, the arrogant chief aggressively commands Lex to finally show him the allegedly massive monster corpse. Nodding casually, Lex simply points to a completely empty spot directly in front of them. Deeply confused by the totally empty space, Barkley angrily questions how a giant monster could possibly fit there. The chief violently shrieks in absolute terror as a massive viper abruptly drops out of completely thin air. Staring at Lex's casual storage method, the heavily panicked chief frantically asks where he acquired a highly mythical magic bag. Deeply confused by the intense reaction, Lex innocently explains that everyone back in his totally normal village owns one. Smirking in utter triumph, Elmer proudly asks her completely exhausted chief if he finally grasps the massive situation. Totally overwhelmed by the physical proof, the pale chief weakly nods in sheer absolute defeat. Elmer aggressively scolds him, firmly reminding the chief she reported this legendary boy ever since he killed the dragon. Finally connecting the massive dots, Barkley absolutely realizes Lex is the infamous newbie dragon slayer. Glaring furiously, Elmer harshly points out that doing his job would have prepared him entirely for this massive shock. Resigned to his total defeat, Barkley grumbles that Elmer aggressively orchestrated this entire humiliating reveal. Refocusing on the massive crisis, Elmer strictly urges the chief to finally take the apocalyptic situation completely seriously. Staring intently at the massive viper, Barkley firmly admits he believes the terrifying story entirely given Lex's track record. He rapidly questions Lex about the demon, strictly demanding to know where the remains of the gate and monster are. Looking totally embarrassed, Lex heavily apologizes, firmly explaining he completely obliterated both targets into another dimension. Barkley deeply sighs, strongly emphasizing that hard physical proof is absolutely required to pull massive government attention. Elmer firmly agrees, logically noting the highly suspicious higher-ups will absolutely demand concrete evidence before taking massive action. Lex deeply understands their political concerns, secretly recalling from his past life that nobles entirely despise baseless rumors. Rushing to defend Lex's completely honest story, Hiro aggressively confirms he entirely witnessed the massive spatial magic attack. Norb steps firmly forward, heavily guaranteeing the story's absolute truth entirely in the sacred name of the Holy Church. Pondering deeply, Barkley entirely decides the massive frozen viper corpse might just be enough to force the army's massive involvement. Lex heavily apologizes again for completely destroying the vital evidence entirely during his massive magical attack. Flashing a totally reassuring grin, Barkley firmly commands the deeply worried boy to leave all political matters entirely to the adults. Changing his entire tone to totally deadly serious, the chief strictly commands everyone to maintain absolute total secrecy regarding the demonic incident. Hiro loudly complains that erasing Lex's demonic kill is completely unfair. The chief counters that civilian livelihood is far more important. Pointing at Lex, he promises exceptional rewards for the monster's corpse. Using his authority, the chief promotes Lex directly to a B-rank adventurer. The party erupts in shock over the sudden B-rank promotion. The chief admits he originally wanted to promote Lex to A rank. He explains that giving a newbie an A rank would breed corruption suspicions. Lex rationally compares the situation to his rapid D rank promotion. Hiro complains but completely trusts Lex will soon reach A rank. The chief announces his plan to accelerate Lex's future promotions. Deeply confused, Lex innocently asks what the dangerous territory actually is. The chief explains they are heavily restricted forbidden zones. Lex realizes his B-rank promotion is just a required access pass. Flashing a grin, the chief loudly confirms Lex's accurate tactical deduction. He explains that conquering a dangerous territory solidifies a massive heroic achievement. Blinking in confusion, Lex questions what conquering a restricted territory entails. The chief describes irregular places like the highly poisonous corroded land. The chief explains the panicked government needs powerful heroes to stop the swamp. Pointing outside, he highly recommends Lex target the massive B-rank territory nearby. Elma advises Lex to ignore the chief's highly irresponsible statement. She explains his massive demonic achievement must remain hidden for now. Utterly ignoring her caution, Lex eagerly ponders his brand new quest. His heroic spirit rapidly and completely ignites. Completely admitting ignorance, he feels compelled to help. Steeling his massive heroic resolve, Lex deeply commits to the task. Lex confidently smiles as he prepares for his new dangerous mission. He loudly declares he will try going to the dangerous territory. Org boasts to his friends about his sheer competence. Lex happily greets Org and asks if he's been working hard. Lex enthusiastically shares that he exterminated a snake monster today. Lex notices Org is in a good mood and asks what happened. Proudly pointing outside, Org tells Lex to look at his catch. Lex is surprised to see a massive evil boar. Org explains he stumbled upon it by chance during a quest. He brags about how tough it was but claims nothing survives his blow. He boasts that single-handedly defeating a B-rank monster proves his getting stronger. His friend teasingly argues it was just dumb luck and good armor. Lex defends Org, stating that equipment is just a tool. Blushing slightly, Org notes Lex isn't holding back on the compliments. Lex insists he can tell Org defeated it beautifully. Lex notes that small boar children are quite rare. He explains that grilled boar child meat is extremely soft and delicious. He praises Org for finding one, noting the steak will be delicious. His friend asks if Org was going to a banquet tomorrow. Org suddenly remembers he has important business tomorrow. He boasts that nobles invite high-level adventurers like him. Lex admires Org, saying he'd feel troubled and reject a banquet invitation. Org laughs loudly, deciding to drink lightly tonight. The adventurers loudly complain that they will get lonely if their leader leaves them. Their companion aggressively tells them to stop whining because they aren't kids anymore. One adventurer eagerly suggests they can just go together with him. Lex reminds them they are only F-rank adventurers and cannot enter a dangerous territory that requires a B-rank. His teammate grumbles that the two of them act like annoying siblings. She thoughtfully suggests that Hyro should also focus on ranking up. Hyro complains they will need something extraordinary just to catch up to Lex's level. Lex encourages them, explaining that polishing body-strengthening magic alongside their training will make them stronger quickly. A teammate notes that strong people don't just rely on talent, but also put in a lot of effort. Hyro anxiously asks Lex if he truly believes they can climb the stairway of strength. Lex confidently reassures Hyro that he is sure they can do it. Hyro eagerly vows to catch up and tells Lex to wait for him. Lex happily promises he will be waiting for them. Another companion doubts this, assuming Lex will be an S-rank by the time they reach B-rank. While Lex rapidly denies this, his party fully agrees it's highly possible. Mina promises to do her best to learn lightning magic and thanks Lex for teaching them. Lex warmly tells them they can always return if they feel lonely while ranking up. A teammate expresses regret that there won't be anyone to teach them magic anymore. She notes that town magicians only teach the very foundation of magic to their students. Lex unexpectedly suggests they should visit his hometown village for further study. He explains he wrote a magic textbook in his village, deeply surprising his friends. They excitedly demand to see a magic textbook written by Lex himself. Lex modestly explains he wrote it just to teach magic to the local village kids. Intrigued, his companion admits she is getting curious about his village in many ways. Lex nervously wonders if his textbook will actually be useful since it was only meant for children. He quickly changes the subject, giving them directions to his village in the west. Lex waves goodbye to his friends and prepares to leave. His companion reveals Org was called by the feudal lord and asked her to pass on a message. She relays Org's apology for not seeing him off, wishing him a good journey. She laughingly adds that she left the guild chief because he had too much work piled up. Hyro promises to catch up to his leader as they exchange farewells. Megui tells him to be careful, and his companion jokes about waiting for souvenirs. Bidding them a cheerful goodbye, Lex promises to surprise the people at his destination. He reflects warmly on how comforting the town became during his short stay. Acknowledging his fate as an adventurer, he takes to the sky using flight magic, completely shocking his friends. His stunned companion wonders just how many ridiculous types of magic he can use. Realizing flight magic must be difficult, she questions if non-magicians can truly appreciate his skills. She recalls rumors that flight magic is still being studied and no human has freely flown yet. She concludes it's much easier to just train a flying monster if one wants to fly. They all ultimately agree that Lex is truly extraordinary and always does crazy things. Stretching his arms, the young boy eagerly declares he is going to train hard so he can go adventuring with his Aniki, Lex. A young girl approaches him with a sly smile, asking if he wants to know more about Lex. Startled by the sudden question, the boy loudly proclaims that he absolutely wants to know more about his idol. The girl casually points out that everyone was deeply interested when Lex mentioned visiting his hometown earlier. Thrilled by the idea, the boy imagines Lex's hometown as an unbelievable place beyond their wildest dreams. Taking charge, the girl confidently decides that their entire group should go visit Lex's hometown. She reasons that exploring his birthplace might finally reveal the hidden source of his overwhelming power. Fired up by the prospect of uncovering the secret behind Lex's strength, the boy eagerly orders everyone to pack their things. The rest of the adventuring group throws their fists in the air, cheering in roaring agreement. Suddenly, Elmer spots the guild chief awkwardly lingering nearby and questions what he is doing there. Sweating nervously, the guild chief makes up excuses about wanting some screen time and feeling obligated to see Lex off. Admitting he is also curious about Lex's secret, the guild chief is quickly dismissed by Elmer, who tells him to get back to work. As Elmer drags him away, he frantically yells for the kids to let him know if they discover anything. Marveling at Elmer's terrifying strength, the group quickly gets back to work as she claps her hands in command. The scene shifts to an elegant dining room, where a noble lord warmly invites Org to enjoy a lavish feast. Sitting at the grand table, Org stares down in awe at the incredibly extravagant dishes laid out before him. He eagerly takes a bite, his eyes sparkling with pure joy at the unbelievably delicious taste. Without hesitation, Org blissfully devours the incredible meal while his noble hosts watch. Casually breaking the comfortable silence, the noble lord mentions hearing that Org recently hunted another evil boar. Org confirms he defeated an evil boar recently, though he looks slightly confused by the word another. The lord's butler leans in, praising the rumor that Org accomplished this highly dangerous feat completely alone. Waving off the praise humbly, Org explains the monster was relatively small and would have been lethal if it were any bigger. The Lord smiles brightly, complimenting Org's incredible skill as perfectly fitting for an A-rank adventurer. Delighted by his guest, the noble applauds Org for being both highly talented and remarkably humble. The Lord then wonders aloud if Org even needs to continue adventuring, assuming he earned a massive fortune from auctioning a dragon and the evil boars. Leaning forward with a sly grin, the Lord smoothly suggests Org change his occupation and become a knight in his personal service. Standing silently in the background, the butler realizes his lord has finally initiated the main objective of this dinner. The butler quietly calculates that recruiting a dragon-slaying talent like Org would easily keep the rival nobles in check. Panicking internally, the butler realizes he must quickly intervene before his lord offers a political marriage that would upset Lady Celia. Completely bewildered by the conversation, Org stares blankly and asks what they are talking about regarding a dragon. Surprised by the confusion, the Lord explains that the dragon and evil boars Org supposedly defeated are a massive hot topic across the royal capital. The noble happily adds that thanks to Org's heroic efforts, they were successfully able to acquire a rare dragon core. The butler's eyes widen in sudden, horrifying realization as the pieces of a massive misunderstanding click into place. Completely oblivious to the rising tension, the Lord chuckles and tells Org he does not need to hide the fact that he is the local adventurer who defeated the beasts. The butler sweats nervously while the Lord playfully accuses Org of playing dumb just to avoid standing out in public. Staring deadpan at his hosts, Org bluntly clarifies that a completely different adventurer actually defeated the dragon. A heavy, suffocating silence instantly crushes the dining room as the devastating truth drops. Org further explains that he only defeated his very first evil boar a few days ago, completely shattering the Lord's belief that it was his sixth. The crushing reality of the colossal mistake paralyzes the nobles in utter, humiliating disbelief. The Lord's cheerful demeanor evaporates into pure menace as he slowly glares at his butler, John, demanding an explanation. Sweating profusely under the intense pressure, the furious Lord aggressively orders John to explain this massive intelligence failure. Trembling in sheer terror, John stammers helplessly, completely unable to form a coherent excuse. Glaring absolute daggers at his trembling servant, the Lord sharply snaps John's name. His mind breaking under the immense stress, John lets out a desperate, twitchy laugh to fill the terrifying silence. Sweating buckets, John awkwardly tries to save the situation by nervously praising Org as a capable subordinate for defeating at least one evil boar. Completely losing his mind with rage, the Lord furiously screams John's name at the top of his lungs. Lex arrives at his new destination, gazing up at the town sign to confirm he has finally reached Tashi Town. Overlooking the vast landscape, he marvels at the sheer, intimidating size of the sprawling forest right outside the settlement. Comparing it to his previous lives, he realizes he has never seen a forest constantly grow to such immense, overwhelming proportions. Spotting something unusual, Lex narrows his eyes as a sudden flash of magical light catches his attention in the distance. Hearing distant explosions and the crunch of spells, he deduces that the blinding lights must be from adventurers battling inside the tree line. He recalls that this specific area is globally known as the Demon Beast Forest, one of the most dangerous territories in the world. Judging by its ominous name and official B-rank threat level, he immediately assumes the dense woods must be swarming with beast-type monsters. Knowing his magical flying would shock the local residents, Lex wisely decides to land on the ground before strolling casually into the town. Stepping onto the bustling streets, he excitedly takes in the incredibly lively and energetic atmosphere of the busy settlement. Surprised by the heavy crowds, he wonders how the town can be this active when only elite B-rank adventurers are supposedly stationed here. Brushing the passing thought aside, he sets his immediate sights on locating the local adventurers guild to officially register his arrival. Approaching a large, sturdy wooden building, he pushes the creaking door open while thrilling at the prospect of his exciting new operational base. Lex gasps in pure, unadulterated awe as the massive, heavily crowded interior of the bustling guild hall reveals itself to him. Looking around the fascinating, multi-leveled structure, he notes that this particular guild branch cleverly doubles as a popular, thriving tavern. Refocusing his distracted attention, Lex rapidly scans the lively room to figure out exactly where the main request board is located. His sharp eyes quickly land on a nearby group of young kids deeply examining the lower-level mission postings. Observing their mismatched, basic equipment and youthful appearances, he guesses they must be greenhorn adventurers just like him. Checking the massive wooden board, he notices how the different mission ranks and difficulties are clearly, meticulously organized. He quickly realizes that the C rank and lower requests are completely unrelated to the highly dangerous forest nearby. Examining the board closer, he debates taking a basic quest for starters while secretly eyeing the exclusive, high-level B-rank missions. Suddenly, a sharp, authoritative voice snaps directly at him, bluntly stating that he absolutely cannot take those high-level requests with his current rank. Startled by the sudden, intense scolding, Lex looks around the room in utter confusion, wondering who exactly is shouting at him. A fierce, armored young woman points directly at his face, loudly demanding his absolute attention. Crossing her arms with extreme attitude, she sharply reminds the boy that he is the only person standing directly in front of that board. Taken completely aback, Lex instantly blushes as he accidentally blurts out how incredibly beautiful this aggressive stranger is. Realizing he just spoke his inner thoughts aloud, he immediately panics and frantically apologizes for his highly sudden outburst. Blushing fiercely herself, the stunned woman averts her eyes and shyly stammers that she isn't actually mad about being praised. Quickly regaining her fierce composure, she aggressively shakes off the compliment, snapping that flattery was definitely not her main point. Leaning in with strict, unwavering authority, she aggressively lectures him that a newbie needs to find easier requests, as the forest is strictly for B-rank veterans. Scratching his head awkwardly, Lex politely and calmly informs the glaring woman that he actually is an official B-rank adventurer. The confident woman completely freezes in place, glaring at the young boy in sheer, unblinking disbelief. Elaborating further, Lex calmly explains that he recently ranked up and has explicit guild permission to officially explore dangerous territories. Still highly skeptical, the woman narrows her eyes and intensely demands to know if he is actually telling her the truth. As the horrifying reality of her highly embarrassing mistake sets in, she begins trembling uncontrollably in absolute, crushing mortification. Bowing her head in pure, devastating shame, she desperately screams out a massive apology for her incredibly rude and baseless assumption. Slumping over in total, crippling depression, she continues apologizing while Lex frantically waves his hands to enthusiastically reassure her. Trying to smoothly de-escalate the situation, Lex introduces himself as a traveler from Tugai Town and politely asks for the flustered woman's name. Regaining a tiny fraction of her composure, she introduces herself as Lilira, a seasoned local adventurer based directly in the Demon Beast Forest. Lex cheerfully explains that his guild chief instructed him to visit the nearest dangerous territory upon hitting B rank, which naturally brought him here. Staring completely blankly at the boy, Lilira asks if he has finished his mandatory preparations, leaving Lex massively confused. Noting his utterly clueless reaction, she instantly deduces that absolutely nobody ever warned him about what kind of horrific place the forest truly is. Sighing incredibly heavily, she bluntly tells him that his innocent assumption about it just being a normal forest is completely, fatally wrong. Leaning in with deadly, terrifying seriousness, Lilira explains that absolutely everything residing inside that specific forest is a monster. Shocked by the terrifying, unexpected revelation, Lex recoils as his brain processes the sheer, unrelenting danger of the environment. She firmly clarifies that there are 0 normal animals inside, as even the buzzing bugs and the towering trees themselves are highly hostile creatures. Warning him further, she vividly describes terrifying monsters that perfectly disguise themselves as the forest floor or innocent springs just to ambush unaware prey. Adding to the immense dread, Lilira insists that safely looting materials is completely impossible without proper magical barriers and monster-warding incense. She aggressively warns that a severely clumsy person like him will instantly get jumped unless he brings a dedicated barrier user or highly expensive barrier stones. Pointing her finger with extreme firmness, she commands him to either join a well-prepared party or make extensive, expensive preparations before stepping inside. Glaring highly suspiciously at his thoroughly stunned face, Lilira sharply questions if he truly grasps the massive severity of her warning. Internally massively relieved, Lex smiles warmly as he realizes that despite her intense, aggressive scolding, she is actually a deeply kind person. He perfectly understands that her incredibly harsh words simply stem from a place of genuine, heartfelt concern for a complete stranger's safety. Bowing his head slightly, he sincerely and deeply thanks Lilira for taking the time to properly warn him about the dangers. Softening her aggressive stance, Lilira praises his honest willingness to listen, noting that such extreme humility is likely why he reached B rank so quickly. Suddenly, a highly angry voice completely shatters the wholesome moment, bitterly shouting that her total failure to listen to advice is exactly why she just went through hell. Lilira laughs heartily, waving off Lex's compliment and insisting the incident is completely in the past. Overhearing whispers about her friendly nature, she aggressively crosses her arms and declares she hates insensitive people. Feeling the intense stares, Lex notes this is his first time meeting a B-rank adventurer around his age. Hoping to change the awkward subject, Lex politely asks if Lilira is also a certified B-rank. Lilira confirms this, admitting it feels incredibly nice to finally meet an equal-ranked adventurer close to her age. Smiling warmly, she offers to treat Lex to lunch, calling their sudden meeting a lucky stroke of fate. Panicking slightly, Lex frantically insists on treating her instead as an apology for insulting her earlier. Changing the subject, Lilira explains local B-ranks are busy protecting merchants searching for rare dangerous materials. Lex nods in sudden understanding, realizing this constant merchant protection floods the board with lower rank requests. She adds that exterminating the occasional stray monster wandering out of the dangerous forest falls to B-ranks. When Lex asks if monsters frequently escape, Lilira clarifies they actually rarely leave the dense tree line. Casually switching topics, she curiously asks Lex his age, noting his youthful face makes him seem significantly younger. Lex honestly answers he is 15, causing Lilira to gasp in sheer amazement at his rapid B-rank promotion. Lex humbly insists he was just incredibly lucky, prompting Lilira to cheerfully offer to celebrate his next birthday. Chuckling awkwardly, Lex nervously informs her that his next birthday is still an entire year away. Lilira pauses in total confusion, asking him why his next birthday would be a whole year away. Scratching his cheek shyly, Lex sheepishly admits he just turned 15 and celebrated his maturity ceremony very recently. Horrified, Lilira quickly calculates that Lex has actually been a registered adventurer for less than a single month. A heavy, highly tense silence instantly crushes the table as Lilira stares intensely at the young boy. Her expression hardening into pure disgust, Lilira coldly accuses the young rookie of being a total fake. Completely disgusted, she sharply commands him to never speak to her again before angrily storming away. Left entirely alone, a highly confused Lex desperately cries out to know what he did wrong. Panicking uncontrollably, Lex frantically debates chasing after her to apologize while agonizing over what to apologize for. Suddenly, a highly muscular hand violently slaps his back as a laughing adventurer tells him to cheer up. The man casually explains Lilira fiercely hates adventurers who abuse power ranking to artificially boost their guild status. Thoroughly confused by the sudden intervention, Lex politely asks the large, grinning stranger for his identity. The burly man proudly introduces himself as Ivan, a seasoned local adventurer permanently based in this busy town. Shaking his massive hand, Lex introduces himself before eagerly asking what exactly power ranking means. Ivan explains cowardly nobles often party up with powerful veterans to get carried through quests and rank up. Glaring strictly, Ivan sternly advises the boy to stop faking his rank before the forest brutally kills him. Sweating nervously, Lex awkwardly attempts to explain that he has never partied up and always fights solo. Raising a skeptical eyebrow, Ivan highly doubts a mere rookie managed to hit B rank entirely on his own. The other tavern patrons loudly burst into mocking laughter, jeering at Lex to stop acting tough. A nearby adventurer arrogantly demands Lex acknowledge his weakness and immediately demote himself back to F rank. Sighing heavily, Lex internally groans about the constant trouble of proving his true strength in new towns. Grinning aggressively, Ivan smoothly offers the struggling rookie a foolproof method to publicly prove his combat ability. He enthusiastically explains the town has a specialized guild request perfectly designed to measure a newcomer's true strength. Hearing whispers about the infamous newcomer baptism, Lex grows highly nervous about the mysterious upcoming trial. Pumping his massive fist, Ivan loudly commands the young rookie to follow him outside immediately. Gulping down his rising anxiety, Lex bravely prepares to finally show everyone his true, unyielding power. Resolving his inner doubts, Lex firmly decides to crush this trial to clear the massive rank misunderstanding. Stepping out into the bright sunlight, Ivan proudly announces their arrival at the deadly trial location. Lex stares intently at the incredibly intimidating tree line of the infamous demon beast forest towering before them. Ivan strictly reiterates Lilira's earlier warning, emphasizing that absolutely everything inside the dense woods is a hostile monster. He points out the highly dangerous plants are constantly sowing lethal seeds to aggressively expand their deadly territory. Directing Lex's attention forward, Ivan points towards struggling adventurers desperately fighting near the violent forest entrance. Ivan explains the adventurers are battling a trap plant, a deceptive monster disguised as a tree to ambush. He clarifies the permanent guild request is to aggressively exterminate these plants to prevent the forest from expanding. Smirking aggressively, Ivan reveals the newcomer baptism involves brutally fighting these entrance plants until the rookie learns survival. Sweating heavily under the immense pressure, Lex nervously summarizes the brutal, highly deadly task ahead of him. Lex officially accepts the dangerous mission to exterminate exactly 10 lethal plant monsters using his full power. Laughing heartily, Ivan slaps Lex's back and loudly declares the rookie will easily die if his power is fake.